Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever Gaming Mix podcast, your official podcast from Analog Stick Gaming. My name is Jordan, and to my left is Jeff. You may know us from previously the G4A show, which you can find on the Eat Sleep Game YouTube channel, still some episodes around there. But we are back now. We've had a little bit of time away, and we are now back. How are you, Jeff?
Doing quite well. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. As you know, this has been a bit of an up and down year for me. I just had to step away for personal reasons, and it's taken a bit longer to get back than I would have liked. But obviously, since then, since we did our previous podcast, quite a lot has happened because I am now co-owner of Analog Stick Gaming, which is a site that you set up yourself many years ago now. And
Yeah, back
I'm
in
privileged to be
2017.
on board with it, really, and this is going to be my job. So when you see this podcast on YouTube, which is where it will live for now, I'll figure out an audio version eventually. But at the moment, we're going to keep things fairly simple and stay on YouTube for now. But in terms of our plans for the actual show, Jeff, and what we're going to do moving forward, why don't you want to, you know, take people through that, because you're the one that really came up with the idea for this show.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously the podcast is going to grow. It's going to change. So I mean, feedback that we get from comments, and eventually once we work into like podcasts and stuff, whether it's Spotify or Apple
Yes,
Podcasts or whatever,
absolutely.
all that all the feedback is going to kind of contribute towards what works, what doesn't, what people want to see from podcasts. Maybe there's something that they're not getting from other podcasts that they would like to see here. So I mean, we're definitely going to be growing there. We plan on having kind of a bunch of kind of fun things throughout the podcasts. They'll vary from week to week, whether it's things like games of the week or like Game Pass or PS Plus recommendations, things like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Going into things like that. I've also seen other podcasts do kind of like Metacritic score predictions and stuff like that. So like I would like to do kind of something like that
We
as well.
will absolutely be doing
Um,
that. I mean,
oh yeah.
let's give a bit of background on us for people that don't know us. Obviously, we have a website, but we've Jeff has been writing reviews a lot longer than I have, but I'm also a trained developer. Spent time during development, kind of taken this year off, sort of, and focusing more on the media side of things because I like writing reviews as well. So, with us being both kind of significant review writers, but Jeff beats me to in terms of numbers. This guy puts out, I don't know, sometimes like 5 reviews in a week. um,
Yeah,
um,
it's been kind of busy, especially when I'm getting like codes and they're like, yeah, the game's like 4 to 5 hours. I'm like, send me a code.
yes. And we
I'll
do
look at
very
it.
good work. You'll see many of my reviews over on outerhaven.net as well. So shout out to Keith and everyone over there because they're also a fantastic website and they actually help amplify our stuff quite a bit now and then. So shout out to them. You'll see me if you go on OpenCritic and search up my name, you'll see the reviews I've done for Outer Haven. Eventually, we'll get this site on OpenCritic, probably. um, but yeah,
Fingers crossed.
we're basically big reviewers, so don't just follow this podcast. Go over and check out the website as well, because we've always got things, news, reviews, whatever you could really want in video games, we have it. So yeah.
All without the clickbait. Yeah, that's one thing that I've never wanted to bring to analog stick gaming is rumors or clickbait or articles that are designed around engagement for the wrong reasons.
Yes, I agree.
That's one thing I've just never wanted to bring on there, or even like talk about really leaks or anything like that. That's just never been my my intent. That and like in case you missed it, Nintendo has released the GameCube type of tweets where they're like repeating the same article like
Yeah,
15
yeah,
to
yeah.
20 times a day.
But
But
also that's kind of the point of this podcast as well, because it gives us a space to um, talk about things in a slightly different way, and kind of in a normal week, because the idea is that we should be doing this once a week. Hopefully it won't be every week, just because I'm in the UK, Jeff is in Canada, and figuring out time zones can be difficult. But most weeks we'll be here and we'll be talking about news, and we'll have a main topic of the show. And as Jeff said, we'll do things like Game Pass or PS Plus recommendations. We'll talk about what we've been playing as well, because we play a lot. I mean, Jeff has been playing something very recently that hopefully we will speak about a little bit later on. Um, but as for this episode, obviously, with us being away from the podcast space for so long, we wanted to talk about the year of 2023 for video games. Because it's been a bit of a crazy one, right, Jeff?
oh yeah, this has been a very, very, very good year.
I mean, I keep having discussions with people of like, is this the best year ever in gaming? And people seem really split on it, because I feel like people who play a higher variety of games seem to all say yes, because there's been a lot of variety of very high quality. And it's like today, at time of recording, we've had the reviews drop for both Forza Motorsport and Assassin's Creed Mirage. And okay, they're maybe not as strong as some other releases this year, but they're two fairly strong releases that are essentially releasing on the same day to people, which is, and they're in completely different genres, right?
Or is
So
this the early access? Because I don't think the actual game comes out for a
yeah,
little
so
bit
so
yet.
the standard edition of Forza Motorsport comes out on the 10th, but you can get the premium either
Yeah.
upgrade if you're a Game Pass subscriber, or buy the full premium edition if you want to, and that will be, you'll be able to play that on the 5th, which has probably gone by the time I've got this episode out, because that's the only thing at the minute. Is one thing I'll say is we don't know exactly when these episodes will go out, because we're still trying to figure out the technical side of things and how long it's actually going to take me. I've never really done video editing before, so who knows? Maybe this won't actually be that edited. But our plan is, hopefully in the future we'll be able to talk about games and have some gameplay showing and things like that in the background. But yeah, mostly, it's just a fun place to talk about video games, and now and then we're gonna have some guests on as well. So you might see some episodes where it's just me here with a guest, or it's both of us, and we'll kind of figure that out, and we'll play it by ear depending on timings and stuff. Because as I said, with Jeff being in Canada, time zones can just be a little bit awkward. um, um, and we want to get some good people on this podcast. If you didn't listen to the G4A show that we previously did, I managed to get people like David Jaffe on that show, or Mike Bithell, or any other kind of number of people. Um, and we will look to do the same here. We have, between us, we have some decent connections that we should be able to get some interesting interviews and things like that. Um, so this is going to be a good time, and as Jeff mentioned earlier, we are looking for your feedback. So please, give it to us in the comments. Constructive criticism is always welcome. So Jeff, let's get to talking about 2023, because I feel like we might be here a while. I'm going to get you to
Yeah.
go through the list of games, and
Yeah.
as we hit one that we want to talk about, we'll stop and talk about it.
Yeah, like this isn't everything. I basically just found like a list online of the stuff that's come out. I've also added a few things that I've reviewed. that were not part of that list. Um, First one, so this is by January right now, is Fire Emblem Engage. Now I've been a fan of Fire Emblem ever since Awakening. That was like the first title that I really got into, and Engage is the follow-up to Three Houses,
Okay,
which was
this
the
so
last one
this
where it
isn't a
split.
game that I played. Did you play this game, Jeff?
Yeah, yeah, I reviewed it. I thought it was fine. I definitely like Three Houses better in terms of some of its cast. But this game was actually pretty good. Like if you like Fire Emblem, this returns to some of the um, I guess roots of the series in terms of like just some of the basic systems, but it wasn't too bad. Like I didn't think the story was as good as it could have been. Some of its cast is really, really good. The gameplay still feels nice. It's a bright and vibrant looking game. But I definitely did like Three Houses better than Engage. And Engage had been like done for quite a while. They were holding on to like a finished game for a great deal of time, which is what Nintendo has done. I mean, even Pikmin 4, I think, had that same thing. But
Yeah, I mean we've heard that
uh,
about Nintendo a few times, haven't we? That apparently the way they develop games is basically just to finish them off and then hold them for whenever they're needed. um, which kind of seems like a smart thing to do in some ways because it allows them to delay games internally without anyone ever having to really worry about it, right? And that's
yeah,
something that Xbox and PlayStation aren't able to do as easily because they're just, they're trying to do things in a different way.
yeah. And I think with Xbox and PlayStation, their games have a considerable bigger budget because like the Switch's hardware allows them to kind of like have a little bit of breathing room
Yeah.
on some of their tech. Like they're not absolutely visual masterpieces, but they're sometimes shorter experiences too.
Well, let's hope there's some hardware for those experiences to improve soon.
Yeah. Monster Hunter Rise eventually hit Xbox and PC and all that kind of stuff too. So that brought like a game that looked incredible on the Switch.
Yeah,
Um,
it did look very
and
good.
kind
I played a
kind
little
of
bit
brought
of
it back
this one.
out.
So I
Yeah,
did
Rise
play.
was
I played a
pretty
little
good.
bit of it on Switch. Monster Hunter has never really connected with me, and I don't know why.
Mm.
Because it should. It's the kind of game that I should enjoy. Especially with friends. Like I just like those kind of cooperative multiplayer experiences. You'll know, Jeff. We've played many of them together. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I don't know what it is. Something about the combat in Monster Hunter games has just never quite clicked with me to the point where I'm playing it and I'm just not having fun.
Yeah, sometimes it's
Unfortunately.
finding like the weapon that works for you. Because like I previously didn't care for the Monster Hunter series, and then I tried World, and I'm like, okay, this one really got me. And Rise is like a more almost arcadey kind of version of World because like it's a lot faster paced.
Yes,
There's
yeah.
systems and mechanics that are built around getting into the action extremely quick. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Monster Hunter formula pretty soon here.
Yes, yeah, we will.
Next up, we had Forspoken,
Well,
which
this one
I've
was
played.
interesting.
Yeah, like I've played a little bit of it. Like I bought it when it was brand new, and now I think you can find it for like $20, and I think the trade-in value is like five. So I'm like, I guess I'm holding on to that game forever.
Yeah.
Um, but no, like I've tried playing it, and I think it is fine for what it does. I think that the like visually, I think it looks good. The dialogue's not great.
I didn't
Um,
hate the game though. Like I
yeah,
admittedly I didn't finish it. And a few games have kind of fallen into that situation this year. But I actually think the game was better than it was probably given credit for, but I can
yeah,
understand why it was looked at that way because I think that we've spoken about it before, but often with reviewers, especially, expectation can be the thing that completely kills a game, regardless of what it delivers or doesn't deliver.
It, like the one expectation with that game that kind of didn't really service it that well is I think that was the game that Square Enix was like, this is our like quadruple A
Yeah. Yeah,
game
they
or
built it
something like
up
that.
big, right? And that's the thing as well, is what we do have to remember is that marketing and the way that these companies put their games across ultimately is the thing that sets that expectation. That's not to say that there's ever times where, you know, there are games that have a higher expectation just because of what fans perceive around them. For example, um, I think of somebody like a Hideo Kojima, right? And it doesn't matter what Kojima is making, there's a certain level of expectation when it comes to his game. And he can kind of show very little and the expectation still remains at that same level. Whereas if other
Yes.
games did that, the expectation would be really, really low, and therefore people, you know. And I guess what I'm trying to say is ultimately the expectation you have going into a game can really impact how you perceive it coming out of the game. And I think that if you go into Forspoken with the right level of expectation about what that game is, there's actually still a decent game there. It's, there is a fun time to be had. The traversal in particular, I actually found really enjoyable. Um,
Mm.
I agree with you completely about the dialogue, but I'm also a little bit split on that because I feel like it's kind of intentional in the
Oh
sense
yeah,
in the
for
sense
sure.
that
Because it's
I think the character is meant to be out of place because of what the narrative is. So because it makes sense in my head, it almost makes it less bad than it is. And it's that weird thing of like, I don't think it's bad. I think it's just so, again, using that term, out of place that it comes across as bad because it doesn't
yeah,
fit with the setting, but it does fit with the narrative and the character. And that's why the way that
yeah,
she
like
reacts to things makes sense to me, for example.
yeah. And my point here will transition into our next game. Um, and that is that the dialogue for me, it didn't feel like it fit the tone because it is this comical type of thing. It feels more like it's the type of dialogue you would find in like a DreamWorks or a Pixar movie that's kind of skewing a little younger. So like it has that almost cartoon like dialogue, which is why Hi-Fi Rush, which is our next game to talk about, the dialogue works there because it is a cartoon.
Yeah.
Like those characters say very similar type of things in regards to their tone, but because
Yeah.
it visually looks like it does,
Everything
that
matches the same tone in
works.
Hi-Fi Rush, right?
Yeah.
And that's
I mean, like,
that's what the difference is there.
yeah,
You
Hi-Fi
finished
Rush
Hi-Fi
was,
Rush, and I haven't
yeah,
yet. So what I'd like to say is that I have it. The reason I haven't finished Hi-Fi Rush is not because it's not a great game. It's a phenomenal game. The reason I haven't finished it is purely because it was one of those situations, as has happened many times this year, where other things that I also wanted to play came out around the same time. And Hi Fi Rush, I was like, I know that this is a shorter experience that I can finish off towards the end of the year. And I know that it's one that doesn't necessarily need me to finish it right now in order to have a really cool conversation about it. Um, and it is one I fully plan to go back and finish. But Jeff, I know that you really liked the game, so why don't you talk about it a bit more in detail?
yeah. Like it's a contender for my game of the year for sure. Like it's really well done. Um, I had heard how the reception around it, and I didn't even check any trailers or anything. I just saw the kind of the splash page, like the cover of it, and then I got home and I was just immediately hooked. Like this game came out of nowhere. This was by a studio that was generally making horror games,
That's an
and
important thing to
they
mention. Actually, let's remember
they
that
were
this was a shadow drop on the Xbox Developer Direct, which was their kind of first showcase this year, and they literally
yeah.
shadow released the game the same day, and that doesn't tend to happen with games of this quality. You know.
No, but it allowed the conversation to be just about the game more so than like the hype cycle. Because Xbox was having an issue like releasing first party games. So by not having that conversation of like, will it be good? They just dropped it, and people were like, holy, holy crap! Like this is absolutely fantastic. Um, One game that did not shadow drop and had a healthy amount of kind of hype and marketing behind it was the Dead Space remake. This game is absolutely stunning. It kind of returns back to the first Dead Space. It remakes it. It adds a bunch of stuff that was left off the cutting room floor, and it makes the Ishimura like a um, just a completely untethered type of experience. It's one of the best remakes pretty much out there, um, and it's one of those games that is definitely worth the buy. Like not even on sale. Like just if you are interested in the Dead Space remake, to definitely just get it. It is unbelievably good. Jordan, did you play much of the Dead Space remake?
So this one is a game that I own and I have yet to play
Yeah,
because my plan originally was to save this one for Halloween season, right? I just like to play that kind of game. Obviously, I've seen the game. Obviously, I know what the game is. I know what it's done really well. And I
yeah,
think that's part of it is like, I know that I'm going to like this game no matter when I play it. And therefore,
yeah.
I have no immediate rush to play it. There
And then
is.
Alan Wake called you
Yeah,
and they're like, "Hey, you up?"
this is the thing. Is like, you know, we'll get to October later on, which we're in right now. But man, this month is crazy. it's yeah, it's crazy. So I will get to Dead Space by the end of the year. Like that's absolutely the plan. However, there is a horror remake that I will speak about fairly soon, a little bit in the future, as we keep going through the list here. So,
Nice. Yeah, wrapping up January was SpongeBob SquarePants: The Cosmic Shake, which was fine. You know, like was that
yeah.
was like the first that studio that did the remake of
We actually
Battle
both
for Bikini
reviewed
Bottom.
this.
Hydrated.
I did a review for Outer Haven. I believe I gave it 3 out of 5 stars over there. Um,
Yeah,
it was fine. Like at the end of the day, it's a game that isn't really aimed towards me, and
mm,
but for the audience that it is aiming towards, it does its job very very well, and that's why for me it got a 3 out of 5 stars. I couldn't rate it higher than that because it's not really for me, but I would be lying if I said it wasn't a good kind of.
yeah.
This is a game that I'd
Well,
recommend to an 8-year-old kid. Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah, and it's that studio that did like the Hydrated remake, and for
yeah,
them to make an original SpongeBob that felt like the older ones,
yes,
I thought that was a safe bet for them. And I think honestly for SpongeBob fans, like we've been kind of waiting for like a game like this, like a brand new entry. And I think they do a fantastic job. I think there's promise there if they were to do another one.
just
But
just a slight update before we move to February. I like to keep an eye on reviews, and Forza Motorsport is currently sitting at an 85 on OpenCritic. So That's interesting. Because it just made me think of, like, we were talking about Xbox earlier and how they were struggling for games in 2022. Even though I still believe they released two very, very good games, I think they were just of a scale that people don't really pay attention to much. Grounded and Pentiment, in my opinion, were two very good games.
Yeah, Grounded was super fun.
But yeah, so there we go. What do we have in February, Jeff? Because I actually can't remember at
Um,
this point.
oh God, I reviewed quite a bit of this. Um, so Metroid Prime Remastered, that got pretty much announced and then released pretty close to it. I played a little bit of it. Um, I think it's a fantastic game that has absolutely horrible checkpointing. That was my only big issue with it. Moving on here, we have Hogwarts Legacy, which I did beat. I have like half of a review written. Um, I just got busy with a bunch of stuff and never got back to it.
So
But
this is one that I didn't beat, and I'll tell you exactly why. It's because I played about 20 hours of the game,
yeah,
and I really enjoyed the gameplay. But the story and the overall narrative of the game just never grabbed me whatsoever. I
yeah, it it
for
gets better
for
like
what
as you progress
for
through.
whatever
But yeah,
reason, I think it was more the fact of, like, I like the world, and I think they realized it very, very well. Especially
mm,
Hogwarts itself. Um, but it, I want to be, as a Harry Potter fan, that's the period of time I want to be in. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
within that world, that's when I want to be in that world. Or I would rather be in that world after. Being before isn't as interesting to me. And that's
For
just
me,
me.
it wasn't so much the time period or anything. I think that was fine for me, just because it allows them to kind of play with a bunch of stuff. My biggest issue was that Harry Potter was what it was because you had Harry Potter, you had Ron, you had Hermione, you had his sort of sect of friends that really made that adventure one about friendship, one about unity, all that kind of stuff. You don't have that here. You have friends, but they don't really contribute much to that friend group. Like I wouldn't consider any one of those characters to be part of like to be their Ron or their Hermione. And I think it would if it would have had that tight knit group with maybe one of them always with you at any given time, I think that would have worked. And you had that with like the one teacher
Yeah.
who was kind of with you every now and then. But that was my biggest issue is it didn't have that friendship, that unity of friendship that Harry had that made it such a compelling story.
Do you know what
And
does
say what
surprise
you want
me?
about the franchise now,
What
but
what does surprise me about Hogwarts Legacy quite a lot, even from what I played of it, is, and I mean it's happened to a lot of games this year, as we'll discuss, but the conversation around the game died out really, really quickly. Where it kind of seemed to be in people's minds for about 2 weeks, and then and then it just completely disappeared off the face of the earth. um,
yeah, and most of the conversation then turned to like outlets like I think Wired that gave it like a 1 out of 10 or something like that, just based off their disdain for J.K. Rowling, which is fine. I just don't think it spoke to the game because the game is the Harry Potter game that we've always wanted.
yeah,
Like
and,
it's a big
and that
budget Harry
was
Potter
and
game.
that was kind of what turned
Great.
me on it, because look, I'm not a huge fan of J.K. Rowling. The reasons are obvious as to
Oh yeah.
why. We don't need to go into that here. But as a gamer, it's kind of like, I actually bought the game for my partner, who's a massive Harry Potter fan. But we game share on PlayStation, so I was like, I'll buy it on PlayStation, and that way, if I do want to play it, at least it's there. Um, because I bought it for her, and then I was like, I owe it to myself as a gamer to play this video game, just to see. Um,
Mhm.
and I get exactly what you mean. I think it's difficult, isn't it, where when there's somebody who people disagree with and maybe says things they shouldn't say and that kind of thing, um, it almost makes like the review process a little bit political in some places, and I'm not sure I've ever agreed with that. The same with, like, we've seen it with Activision games over the last while now, where obviously because of culture issues there, um
Mhm.
there's kind of been a bit of a like, oh, we're not going to give Activision any credit. And it's like, but people still work on those games and they spend years of their lives making them. They want you to view the game as a game and you know, base your opinion on the game itself and not on circumstances kind of surrounding
Yeah.
it. It's very
And there's
hard.
even stuff that the developer did to like counter a lot of J.K. Rowling stuff as well
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
But
So
yeah, at the end of the day, it is
moving
a
on
fantastic game.
though, what else do we
Yeah.
have?
So we had the very weird and bizarre Wanted Dead, which was like a third person shooter and stuff that has a incredibly weird story. Its lead actor, um, she is it was her first role, and you can hear it in every moment of her delivery, but it's one of those games that is so absolutely bizarre and bad in a way that it's actually a very interesting game to play. But a review is up on the site as well too.
I
Um,
was going to say that's one I haven't
Returnal,
heard of, so that's very interesting.
yeah, Wanted Dead is definitely worth checking out. I don't know about buying it. Returnal hit PC, so PC players finally got to try that out. Wild Hearts, which was the EA Originals title with I think Koei Tecmo,
I believe
that
so,
made
yes.
um, kind of their Monster Hunter. There's rumors apparently that the servers were shutting down. I don't know if there's any
So that
credibility
was
to that.
reported somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but that was definitely reported that they were going to shut down by the end of this year or something. And it's like,
Yeah, I mean if that's true, that sucks because it is very good. And here's the thing too, like this is now the second EA Originals title that has had a big budget, this and Immortals of Avium, that has had something bad happen, whether
yeah.
it's the server shutting down or the development studio
And
losing half of
also,
its staff.
I didn't play Wild Hearts. I heard nothing but good things about it.
It's
Um,
very good.
Immortals of Avium was a little bit more mixed, but I did think the game had a very strong foundation for something
Yeah.
in the future. And I think it brings. I do want to have a little. We like a tangent, Jeff, so I want to take 5 minutes to have a little tangent here about the fact that these games that sort of fall between that 7 and 8 on a review scale tend to completely get ignored by the general gamer these days. And I
There's so much to play.
and I
I
know
don't.
there is so much to play, but I can't remember who it was that tweeted it, but somebody tweeted when basically, because what happened with Immortals of Avium is the game came out, it didn't do well enough financially, and they've essentially cut like half their staff or something. Is that right, Jeff?
For the Immortals of Avium,
Yeah,
yeah, they lost 50%. They they're back down to what they were when they started development.
which is really, and to give a bit of background to people, there are always cuts, no matter how successful a game is, there are always cuts to the staff after a game has released. Because you will have contractors whose contracts come to an end and they just don't get renewed because they're not really needed for the next thing or whatever. But this is different. This is like the game wasn't enough, like, it wasn't financially successful enough to keep
Yeah.
these people in place. And what I would say is, it just frustrates me as a creative person, but also as a gamer myself, of like, we hear gamers sort of complain for years that they want new things and they want people to try different things. And when a brand new AAA studio comes around, that game doesn't get supported unless it's the best thing since sliced bread immediately. And it's almost like people have forgotten that, especially for brand new studios, their first thing is never going to be the best thing. But if you don't support the first thing, you don't get the second thing. Can you imagine if Assassin's Creed 1 had come out, not been supported, and that had been the end of the franchise? Look at what happened with Assassin's Creed 2. It became a significantly better game, literally one game later. If that game, it's kind of like, I'm not saying that people have to go out and buy things and play things, right? But I do think there's this weird culture in gaming now, and part of it is probably subscription services, where games that are good but not necessarily great seem to largely get ignored, or it's kind of like, I'll buy it on sale, or I'll play it later, or I'll play it when it's on a subscription service. And and 5 years ago, and certainly 10 years ago, that didn't really happen. Like, 10 years ago, if you saw a good looking game that you were interested in, even if it wasn't necessarily the best game, you went and bought it and played it because that's what you wanted to do. And I think that...
Yeah. Around that time, though, you still had renting, which is kind of the subscription service. So you still had a chance to check out the game at a cheaper cost.
That's true.
People also...
And there were also more demos back then, right, as well, which helped. But it's just...
Yeah.
I just wonder what we do, because it's kind of like, people don't want the cookie cutter same stuff over and over again, which I totally understand. But then the new stuff that's trying to do something different, unless it's from a really well-known team, never ever gets supported.
Yeah, I think the cost of that game was also kind of maybe a little too high for like a brand new IP to kind of toss in, especially since it is part of the EA Originals thing.
Well, I think that's something we saw with a game like Days Gone on PlayStation, right? Where that game was actually successful, but it wasn't successful enough because the cost of making the game was so high. If the cost was lower, maybe that story would have been different as well.
My big concern is that the last two big budget EA Originals games have resulted in some type of failure, and that I fear that the EA Originals program is just going to go back down to like much smaller releases, which is fine.
I mean, their last one won Game of the Year, right? So
yeah. Again, it's just one of those things where it's like, I want teams to have the budgets that they need to make those games, and if EA Originals program decides to scale back, then it kind of limits that.
What I would say, though, as a quick thing, as a final note, just before we move on, is that program likely has one or two things already in development that we don't even know about yet. So hopefully, if they have some bigger budget things still in development, hopefully those ones can be successes and push the program forward, because I have to give massive credit to EA. I think that when they first kind of brought this Originals program out, everybody was a bit like, what are they really doing? Because they've never really done this before. Why are they doing it? Is it going to be successful? But actually, they've really helped some studios, and look at where Hazelight are now. And that is basically completely thanks to EA and their support, And Hazelight's next game will be a massive success because they've built up that reputation now of doing a certain type of game very, very well. And And we need programs like this EA Originals program to allow new studios to find the funding to do the things they need to do, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed that they have a few more big budget things in development and those can be successes. But let's carry on with 2023 because we have many to get to.
Yeah. So we had Scars Above, which is kind of like a third-person sci-fi shooter. It was actually quite good. I quite enjoyed it. Tales of Symphonia Remastered came out, which is a remaster of the worst version of that game, and it actually plays and like essentially performs worse than like the GameCube version. Which sucks because like um, I really liked the original, and hearing that this one was just not a good remaster at all just kind of sucks. Atomic Heart came out. I played a little bit of it. I really did enjoy it. I do want to eventually go back to it. It's just this year has been so packed, and that was available on Game Pass. So I think once it's about to leave Game Pass, that'll put the fear of God into me, and I'll eventually play
The,
it
the funniest
or
thing,
play
Jeff,
more.
is that this year has been so packed, but so far on our recap, we're not even at the busy part of the year yet.
I don't even know. Next, we have Like a Dragon Ishin, which is a remaster of the original Like a Dragon Ishin that never came to North America,
Yeah.
and
Never
it
came to any
was
Western
remastered.
markets, right? So,
Yeah, it was remastered to the point where popular characters from the series that came out after it were integrated into this. Like even the guy that plays like one of the major bad guys, who I think was the main bad guy in Zero, he has like a movie coming out and it's him, and I'm like, this is so weird seeing him in a movie. But Like a Dragon Ishin is fantastic.
it is a
If you
very
like
good game.
if you like the Yakuza games and
And the crazy
not
thing is,
seven, but the other ones, if you
yeah,
like those,
the
it's
more
basically that.
traditional action-based Yakuza games, it's like those in terms of gameplay. What I really liked about the game was the fact that it's a completely different time period. It is based on a real person to some, to some extent. Um,
Yeah,
and it's based on
and
real
they do a good
events.
job. They do a good job dealing with because like that original guy, like something major happens in his life, and they kind of dance around that in a very, very cool way here.
Yeah.
Um, which really it really sells like how good that game
And
is.
the other thing I'd say as well is if you've never played a Yakuza Like a Dragon game before, this is probably the easiest one to play as a completely standalone game because
Yeah,
it's
and
so separate.
you can summon Raul Coley and Natasha Nyanners and all those characters in there,
Mhm.
which was
Yeah.
very interesting
And
seeing
also,
Raul
I don't
Coley.
know. Quick shout out to RGG Studios because I do not know how they're pumping games out so quickly. We've got a Like a Dragon game coming in November, which is a spin off game.
Yeah.
Then we have another one coming early next year, which is obviously the sequel to Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon. And it's just
Mhm.
like, how? How are they doing this? Is it just because at this point they've hit the formula so well that they don't really need to change
They're a
much?
well-oiled machine. It's the same reason why like Insomniac has Spider-Man 2 releasing with Wolverine coming out in a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's one of those things where it's like you have a studio that doesn't have the development hell that you get out of, even like the team that's making the next Perfect Dark. How many teams are working on that?
Yeah.
Has it been reset? Who knows? So it's starting, when you have an established team like that,
Yeah.
it goes a long way.
Especially when you have a
Um,
team that hits a certain quality bar every time as well, because we just said about Ishin, like it's a great game. And I haven't played
yeah,
none of the Yakuza games that I've played, I would turn around and be like, "Oh, that's not very good." They're all
yeah.
good. They're all good, and they've only
And I
got
mean,
better.
like, when you're not hitting like the quality bar of something like a Naughty Dog game, it's surprisingly how quick you can get a game out that is still absolutely fun and better in most cases.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, Next, we have Octopath Traveler 2. I played the first one. I never got around to playing this one at all. It
So
just
I
didn't
I
interest me.
didn't, but I will be when it comes to Xbox, because there is also some slight confusion right now because certain people of at Xbox have led us to believe that potentially when it comes to Xbox it is going to be day one on Game Pass.
I
But
thought that
there's
was confirmed.
I don't know if that's confirmed or not because when
Yeah.
they originally announced it, they didn't say that it was. And then a few days later, I think it was either Sarah Bond or somebody else basically alluded to the fact that it was going to be a day one game, which is obviously what happened with the first game as well. And I was actually it. It was the first game in a while where I was genuinely annoyed that it didn't come to Xbox at launch because
Yeah.
it made no sense to me because it went to PlayStation as a timed exclusive in terms
It's
of
just like
between
Mass
those
Effect.
two, but yet
It's the
the
same
first
situation as
game was
Mass Effect.
exclusive.
Yeah. It was absolutely weird. I think it was just because of the deals that Sony had going with the current president of Square
Yeah,
Enix, and like
and
now that that
I
guy's
mean
gone, there's new guys in.
Square's relationship with Xbox does seem to be improving. So that's a good thing. And I think that this is one of the signs of that. I can't remember exactly when Octopath 2 is coming to Xbox, but yeah, I will probably try it out then because I loved the first game. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, this one seems a lot better. Going into March, we have one game that I honestly cannot believe that I actually beat. Wolong Fallen Dynasty.
Hold on, did
Um,
you beat that?
this is a game. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God, the
I
last
didn't get out of the
scene
tutorial
flying through
area,
the air.
Jeff.
Oh, that tutorial boss. Holy hell, was that a wall for people? Like I was at him for like hours and hours and hours. Um, and yeah, like that game is absolutely brilliant. Um, yeah, it's really fantastic. Like it's everyone's like, oh, it's a Souls like. I'm like, yeah, yeah, it definitely has like a lot of those traits, but I mean, like it feels like a open world Ninja Gaiden game, which already had that difficulty and that kind of style. But yeah, Fallen Dynasty is fantastic. The co-op helped me through so many battles because like there's some fights in that game that are incredibly brutal. But fantastic game. We also have Valheim finally hit Xbox. I played that a lot on PC, which was super fun.
I still haven't played it,
Um,
so I can't speak much
yeah,
to it.
it's pretty decent. Like I liked building all the stuff. Although on PC you can run mods that allow you to have like unlimited weight and like things float, so you could build bases anywhere. You didn't have to worry about structure and anything like
Nice,
that.
nice.
But super fun game. The Legend of Heroes: Trails to Azure, which was um, the sequel
You reviewed
to
this
Trails
game, right,
to
Jeff?
Zero. Yeah, Trails to Azure is fantastic. Like this was the second game in that series in that arc that was translated by fans, and the publisher was like, "Hey, do you want to work with us on bringing these games to North America and outside Japan?" And they did a fantastic job. Those games are utterly fantastic. Next up, we have the year that I skipped, WWE 2K23, and I played 2K22 for literally like 3 or 4 days, then never touched it.
To be fair, that's always the way with WWE games. I think that they tend to have a short lifespan for most people. Um,
Yeah.
but at least for me, I tend to put quite a lot of time into the game over a short period of time, so it's not like I'm really losing out. Um, I really liked this game a lot. If I was to review it, I probably would have put it around the 8 out of 10 mark on our scale. Um, I think, a few years ago, 2K released a very bad WWE game, like a very bad WWE game, and they moved away from that and they obviously redesigned the gameplay and everything. So 22 was definitely a bigger jump and change, but 23 makes some smart tweaks to that Revolution in the previous year that make it just as strong a game, in my opinion. But it's definitely, as with all of these kind of sportsy titles, you don't have to play them every year because you will have years that are fairly similar. I I really wish for WWE games in particular at this point that they would just become a live service. They are like the only game in existence that I want to be a live service. And I'm happy
And I
to eat.
think the one thing that would benefit them doing that is it would allow like them to toss on events that are current to some of the storylines to a certain extent,
Yeah.
because these games are made over the course of maybe 2 or 3 years back
Mm,
to back, and how they structure it to the point where, like with AEW Fight Forever, by the time that the game released, the roster was out of date, the
yes.
storylines were out of date. Like that's the problem with like wrestling. It's like sports, like when you have like hockey or whatever, you can update the rosters in a patch.
Yeah.
Like, but with
Wrestling
WWE,
changes so significantly that that's not as easy to do.
exactly. So,
But I just wish that they
um,
would, I just, because my thing is, I actually went back and played WWE 2K23 a week ago. I was playing it with a friend, and it's like, it's a really good game, and there'd been some kind of roster DLCs and stuff, but they always plan those ahead of release as well. And it's kind of
yeah,
like, I would actually pay, like, if they said, okay, we're going to make this game a platform, and then instead of charging you full price every year for a new game, what we're going to do is we're going to charge you £5 a month, but you will get roster updates every like 4 to 6 weeks and things
they'd
like that.
almost do like a $30 pack a year that would add like the stuff that they would add
Yeah,
for a sequel without having to like dump
buy
the
a
baby out
brand.
with the bathwater.
Yeah, yeah. And then you
It's what
could
I wanted added
and
to do as
and
well.
then
There's no
and
reason for
and
anyone every
then you
year.
could have a situation where every 2 to 3 years, instead of every year, you do a brand new game that is a more significant change.
Yeah.
Like everybody would love that. But yeah, moving forward because we still have many to talk about here.
Oh yeah. So one game that I eventually want to get to when it goes on sale is Bayonetta Origins, so Reza and the Lost Demon, because it looks interesting. I thought the demo was fine. I just didn't think $80 for it was what I wanted to pay for it, especially after being entirely let down by Bayonetta 3.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, the This next one here is a Game of the Year contender across the entire industry, and that is Crime Boss Rocky City. No, I'm kidding. It's a Resident Evil 4 remake.
Here we go. Here
Resident
we
Evil
go.
4 remake is unbelievably good. Like this is a fantastic remake. It makes that game better. It makes a
Which is
great
which
game
is a hard thing to
better.
do.
I want to play the Separate Ways DLC that came out once I've got time. But yeah, Resident Evil 4 is fantastic. They Leon was a little problematic back then.
For
He's no
me,
longer
for me,
problematic.
Resident Evil 4 was the first game this year that I described to people as a must play game. Even if you've played the original, whether you have or haven't, it's a must play game. It's that good. It's
That's very good.
I don't like we need to put this into perspective for people a little bit, Jeff, because how good really was the original game? How highly is the original game thought of in the for people that don't know, how highly is that game thought of?
I mean, like at the time, it was one of the best Resident Evils. It was the game that redefined the third person game, like putting that camera behind the shoulder. Like, what's weird is like Resident Evil 4 was like a failed attempt at making that game spawned Devil May Cry.
Yeah.
Like, EMC would not exist if it was not for a failed attempt at making Resident Evil 4. And you can see tons of footage of that. But Resident Evil 4, like, it was a benchmark for Capcom. Like, this was a game that was incredibly popular. It was kind of fueled with a little bit of Nintendo's money, to the point where like the game director was like, I will cut off my head if it comes to other platforms. And then since then, it's come to every single platform except for the Amazon Alexa.
Yeah. And and
Um,
and one thing I want to say as well is you can still play that original game today, and it's still very good. It's still a
yeah,
very
but if you
good
play it
game.
on PC, there's a team that did a HD texture remake of that game where they actually went out to that location and took all new pictures and textures
Oh wow,
of where they had kind of based that on. And if you check Susie Spearhunter, if you check out her Resident Evil 4 professional walkthrough, she plays through that version of the game and it looks significantly better.
wow,
Um, so that is the ideal way of playing the original one because it is still the original one. It just looks better.
yeah.
Um,
And then the main thing to say is, well, first of all, I actually think Capcom have kind of been the best at remaking games so far because what they do is they keep the essence of what the original game is, which they've done here with Resident Evil 4, but then they change just enough that it feels like a brand new experience, even to
Hey, the
someone.
island so much better this time around.
Hmm.
Like that last little bit in the original one was just not. It was the worst part of that game. But yeah, like they definitely do kind of keep that essence. I maybe a bit too closely because Resident Evil 3 I think could have been expanded upon,
Yeah.
but
And let's remember
4
as well,
is
like,
amazing.
Resi 4 is a game that inspired so many other games. I think even Dead Space, which we spoke about earlier, which also had a
Oh,
remake.
it was definitely inspired. Glenn Schofield has been very vocal about, and speaking of Glenn, he left Striking
He
Distance.
did, so that's
Like
interesting. That's
that's wow. All right, so we'll move on here. Yeah, so Crime Boss Rock City came out. So if you've ever wanted to play with who's all in that? You got Chuck Norris, Kim Basinger, Danny
Vanilla
Glover,
Ice.
Vanilla Ice. Like you don't put Vanilla Ice in something and not expect it to be like a top tier like
The
no.
cast of this
Um,
game, the cast of this
this
game should have resulted in one of the kind of best but cheesiest games ever made,
yeah,
and instead
it's
it's
one of
just
those games
really
that
cheesy.
if it comes to Game Pass, I'm definitely gonna try it out. Especially since like Payday 3 apparently crashed and burned like crazy. And this is that kind of game. It I mean every time I've watched people play it, they've been like, this is one of the worst games I've ever played, but I want to keep playing. Um, last for ending March is Wolcen Lords of Mayhem. Now I played this on PS5 or Xbox, I can't remember. I played the console version. I was waiting for it to hit consoles. And this is like a Diablo style game. I actually had more fun playing this than some of Diablo 4, and that's mainly because this game has your dodge roll that they took out of Diablo 4, that they had in Diablo 3. And like, if you are looking for a game that is very, very good in that style, get Wolcen. It is fantastic. It's been patched. It's starting to like play a lot better than it did. The glitches on the game were pretty substantial, um, but yeah, if Wolcen is really really worth playing. Um, Untitled, I'll briefly talk about now, even though the console version was just recently, and that was Everspace 2. It hit PC in April. Everspace 2 is very good. It is a like arcade space combat sim or space combat game. If you played Chorus, it's kind of like that, but a bit more open. Like the storyline's a lot better. The space combat is so good that I'd played it just previously to going into Starfield, and that's where the Starfield's like
That
um,
hurt Starfield, I'm
space
pretty
combat.
sure.
It hurt. It just going from Aerospace 2 to Starfield, I was like, oh, this sucks. But Aerospace 2 is fantastic. It's definitely a game I want to get back to because I played for about 10 hours or so. And I loved Chorus, so this was kind of like that again, but with just kind of like a different feel and different tone because like you're a um kind of like a soldier guy, like that you have your ship and stuff, and
Hmm.
it's quite good. Um, Tron Identity hit in April. I never got a chance to actually try this.
Yeah, so I didn't actually. So as you know, I actually do have some sort of relationship with Bithell Games in the sense of I've covered their games before. Mike Bithell's been on my podcast in the past, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't able to get around to this game. But it does look incredible, and it is one that I will play at some point because their last game before it, Solitaire Conspiracy, is literally my favorite version of Solitaire that exists, and in
Mm.
my opinion, is better than any other version of Solitaire. So, I do want to. I'm a Tron fan as well, so anything within that universe is
Yeah, see,
interesting to me.
I can give or take, I can give or take that franchise. Like Tron Legacy is the only one I've watched from start to finish.
Ah, fair enough.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, no, just nothing about the original captured me, and like I like the visual look of Tron Legacy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
they released a movie with a massive cliffhanger ending, and then did nothing with it. Um, Ghostwire Tokyo eventually hit Xbox. I played this to completion. I just never reviewed it. I just didn't have time to put together a
How
review.
was the game, Jeff? Because I
I
haven't played
think
it yet.
it's fine. I think it's fine. Like this is like, if I'm putting up a splash page of 7 out of 10 games, that's what this is. The first person, like it, Immortals of Avium gave me the first person stuff I wanted out of this game. I think it's fine. I don't think it does anything spectacular, but it is still it is still definitely worth checking out. It's on Game Pass, so you can take a look
I
there.
think
Um,
we have a few games here that we can run through fairly quickly. I think, looking at the
yes, yeah,
list.
yeah, that was the plan there. We have here. We got this guy, Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. Um, I've been enjoying it playing on the Switch when I get the chance to. It's definitely worth checking out. Disney Speedstorm is that hit early access. It's now available to play for free. If you were looking for like a good Mario Kart competitor, this isn't it. But if you are looking for a good kart racing game, this is it. Um,
What a
it is
description!
not. It's not going to change. Like if you're looking for something to be like a competitor to Mario Kart, you're not going to find it here. That game is so polished, has so many tracks, has so many characters. This is a kind of like pay to play kind of game where like you can play for free, but if you really want to get the characters you want, you have to really invest your time and sometimes money to get going on there. But the handling, the feel, the remixes of the Disney themes on the tracks are fantastic. I'm personally just waiting for a few Disney characters that entice me because right now there's only a few that I think are even like interesting to me.
Yeah,
Minecraft Legends came out. That was like their RTS kind of Minecraft, and it's fine. I think for what it attempts to do, it is a very capable game
this
at doing that.
this is not a game I've played, but looking at it, it makes me think again, similarly to what I thought of SpongeBob that we spoke about earlier, where it's Minecraft Legends is a game that is essentially meant to be a child's first RTS, right? That's kind of what they're going for. And
Yeah,
when you look at it with that lens, I think it's clear to see, even from me not having played it, it's clear to see that they have achieved that. People were playing it, it reached a good number of players. Obviously, part of that is Game Pass, but also Minecraft is Minecraft,
yeah,
right? And anything with the Minecraft IP on it, kids are going to want to play. And it's such a good way, um, just like that other Minecraft spin off before that I forget the name of, that was kind of like a Diablo style game. Um, they're doing
Yeah, Minecraft.
yeah, they're kind of just they're doing really smart things with Minecraft, which is let's take it across the genres of video games and basically make it this is this child's first version of this kind of video game. And I think that's
Yeah,
a
they're doing the
really
same thing
smart
with like
play.
League of Legends, where they're creating these different gameplay experiences out of their characters.
Mhm.
Um, and there's the one pixelated hack and slash game I still want to play that came out. One I didn't check out was Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores.
So I own this
I never got it.
DLC. I just haven't played it
Yeah,
yet. Haven't even loaded it up.
yeah, I haven't even got it around to it. One game that I played a good chunk of was Dead Island 2.
How was that?
Um, good. Like I played co-op with my roommate, and we had a great time with it. Like I think it's a return to that kind of game. Like it's not an open world game. It's as Sonic has pioneered, it is the open zone game. Um, and no, it's good. If you like the first Dead Island, you're probably gonna like this. It visually it looks fantastic. I mean, I think I had 4 or 5 different developers pretty much attached to the project. If you want to see all the troubles that that game went through, Matt McMuscles has a What Happened that really goes into detail on what happened with that game. The Last Case of Benedict Fox, which is a kind of a stylistic Metroidvania,
Metroidvania, yeah. Yeah.
which is or search action, as we're supposed to call it now. Um, it's actually pretty good. I don't think the story kind of holds up entirely. I think the game is a little bit more challenging than it should have been.
For me, the most unique thing about the game was the kind of art style and presentation. Um, I think it really that was what drew me to the game. Um, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the game. I think it had issues. I think we can talk about the jumping all day long, but um,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, with it, I believe it's still on Game Pass now. It might not be, but if it is, it's definitely one that's worth at least checking out if you're a fan of Metroidvanias. It's not in the same, it's not going to hit the same quality as something like an Ori, for example, but
Yeah,
it is still doing something interesting within the genre and kind of puts its own twist on things, which made it worth my time, is what I'd say. We both reviewed it
sure.
actually, so
Yeah.
you can go and read our reviews.
We got next up is Bramble the Mountain King, which you reviewed recently.
I did, I did.
Hit
I
feedback.
reviewed that one for us. I think that's only my third review for us, maybe. Um, I really liked this game because it wasn't what I expected at all, and and it threw me off in the most delightful way. Like I think I said to you while I was writing the review and everything, and we were going through it, that it's like the game is just delightfully horrifying in the best way, and
Mhm.
it starts off as this really kind of you know somewhat spooky atmosphere. Like you're a boy that wakes up in the middle of the night and your sister's disappeared, and you wander off into the dark, and then next minute you're finding like these lush green meadows with gnomes in, and you're playing basically games of hide and seek with gnomes. But what I really love about the game most of all is the fact that essentially each chapter that you play in this game is like you as the character are playing through a fable, and I believe they're Scandinavian. The fables, they're kind of like
Yeah.
um and they're
Baba
just
Yaga and all that kind of stuff.
and it's yeah, it's just like and throughout the world you will actually find storybooks which you can pick up and read that are the story of the thing you just played through. And it's really, really clever because it kind of teaches you mythology of these Scandinavian fables and things in a way through gameplay, but also through this terrific narrator that I speak about in my review. That I basically want this narrator to just read me every single book in existence, um, because they did such a good
Yeah.
job. So I really liked the game, and again, it was one we got to slightly late because I think it flew under the radar a bit for many people. But if you're
There was
into,
also
go on. Um,
okay.
I was gonna say, like, if you're into slightly creepy, almost like Inside or Limbo style games, this is probably one for you. So I would say check it out. And again, I believe it's still on Game Pass. That was how I played it at least. Um, but yeah, it's also a cheaper game, and I would say it's definitely worth the price from my experience.
Yeah, there was another folklore game that released earlier this year as well called Blacktail.
Ah,
Um,
yes, I
and
remember this one.
that was actually pretty good. I reviewed it, so you can check that on the site. It's pretty good for what it does. We've also got Star Wars Jedi Survivor that released as well, and it had some performance issues at the start for most platforms, but I mean, just like the last one, really. But it's fantastic. It's one of the best Star Wars games out there. It's got a very great cast. It takes place within like the current canon, so it's one of those things that could eventually show up if they decide to do live action stuff with it.
So this
Um,
game falls into the category of another one that I have started but not finished. Um,
yeah,
and again, I plan to if we get any quiet point this year. um,
not gonna happen.
um, I do plan to finish it because I actually think, at least from what I've played, I think it's better than the first game. I think it is an improvement.
Yeah, I would say it is better.
Um, and yeah, if you're a Star Wars fan, like, you should be playing this game, and you should play the first one if you haven't as well, because in my opinion, they are two of the best Star Wars video games ever made. Um, and it's a shame because the director of this game has now left Respawn. Stig Asmussen has left to do other things. I think there has been kind of a confirmation that there's going to be a third game as well, but maybe that shouldn't have happened recently because it was actually the actor for Kel that sort of confirmed that there was going to be a third game. So
Gotcha.
yeah, that was
Um,
interesting.
yeah, like we're moving on here. We've also got so we had Redfall drop.
Oh well, I feel like we need to talk about this one for a minute because I have a few thoughts on this game. I'm
Wait,
not
I gotta
I'm
deal with something in a second.
Okay, all good, Jeff. Don't worry. But yes, so Redfall, obviously, it came out, and we know what happened. It, for lack of a better word, it shat the bed. Right? It wasn't very good. It had technical issues. It wasn't necessarily a terrible game either. It just wasn't good, was it? Like, it just was not a good game.
Yeah,
And
like it failed to execute on anything it was doing.
and it actually was such a not good game that it put into question. This is the crazy thing about it, is it put into question for some people the future of Xbox. like like
Well, like the one thing with Redfall is it was already well into development,
yeah.
that it already had a mind of its own,
Mhm.
and Xbox has already said that they should have stepped in more, but they were
Absolutely.
really focused on Starfield more
Absolutely.
so than
And
this one.
and to be honest, I think in hindsight that was probably the right decision, because the thing about Redfall is, even if it executed the things that it was trying to do very well, it still would have likely only been a good game. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Starfield, as we'll talk about in a bit, had potential to be something much higher than that, and it ended
Yeah,
up being
Starfield
so.
was going to be a game that lived forever. Redfall was going to be a game that lived for a year.
Precisely. and
You know?
and my I do have I have a couple of issues with the whole situation surrounding the game. One is, I think, would Redfall, and I'm going to ask you this, Jeff, because you might know better than me. If Redfall had come out, let's say in January, and like of 2024, and still been the same quality, would the reaction in terms of the overall reaction and conversation around the game, would it have been as bad, or was it just so bad because Xbox hadn't had a AAA first party exclusive for over a year, and that caused this
Well,
situation where the first
the
one
thing that
in such a
sucked
long
about
time.
Redfall was that it was the first game by Xbox under their new pricing model.
Yeah, that hurt it for
You
sure.
know, so that hurt it as well. I mean, if it had been half the price and been advertised as a small experience and stuff, maybe, but there was no saving it.
No.
Like, there's nothing that that game does that is redeemable or fun at all, period.
Thankfully, on an Xbox front, I mean, okay, you can argue a little bit here and there about Halo potentially, but overall, I would say that Redfall is their only real miss this generation so far.
Yeah.
So, I think things are.
Halo missed because of some technical things, not so much because of the game in some respects.
Yeah, and I
Because
think
like
and I think
the
we see that with Halo
campaign,
with how well that game reviewed, right? And how well it actually, like, people were playing it a lot for several weeks after it came out. It was just that it
yeah,
didn't have the content to support what they wanted the game to be. And by the time it got to that point of having the content, because of technical issues and stuff, it by the time it got to that point, nobody cared about the game anymore. And that's the problem with games these days, right? Is like, there's people can move on from games so much quicker, and I actually think that that's one of the issues that Xbox kind of bring on themselves as well, because with Game Pass especially, you can move on from a game even quicker, right? Because you can just be like, okay, I'm going to go and find something else to play. And I think that's why, okay, yes, this year's a little bit different, but we don't. Somebody put across to me about 18 months ago that the problem with Xbox is no longer the quality of their games or the consistency of their games on the whole. It's more the fact that for some reason their games don't feel special in the same way that other platforms make their games feel special. And I've thought about it for quite a long time, and I think that part of that is because Game Pass exists. I think it's that idea of, in the back of our minds, if it's a first party Xbox game, it's always there and we can play it whenever we want. So we don't need to worry about it quite as much. Obviously there are games that break through that, like Starfield, but generally speaking, I think it takes I think having such easy access to it almost takes away some of the magic. And I don't know how that psychology works, but it just seems to be what happens, where it's like, I think of something like um, Forza Horizon, which obviously was a massive success, Forza Horizon 5. But I do wonder to myself, if that game had been on another platform that wasn't Xbox, so if it had been on PlayStation and it was a PlayStation exclusive, would it have had a longer tell, and would it have had a longer conversation and all these kind of things? Do you know what I mean? Because ultimately, right
well, I
now,
mean,
go on.
if you to answer your question, that game exists.
Yeah.
It's the Crew Motorsport.
Good
Like,
point.
that's the answer to your question right there, because I mean that is Forza Horizon on another platform. So I think it just comes down to, I think it comes down to perceptions that people have. I don't think it's so much the games.
Yeah,
It's like
that's true.
I'm more excited to play the next Gears, than most of what Sony has, down the
That makes
pipe.
sense. That makes sense. So anyway,
So
moving on
yeah,
from the terrible
yeah,
Redfall, because obviously
yeah.
that
They
that
didn't have to wait for that long to get a good game going after that.
yeah,
Yeah, we got The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. This is another game that is this game and one other I think are going to be the most debated game of the year when it comes to
I would
like
imagine so. Yeah, I would
the
imagine so.
VGAs. But The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, to me, this is an improvement over Breath of the Wild because it finally gave us the temples back.
Yeah,
It gave me a little bit more of like that Zelda feel. I think my only issue with Tears of the Kingdom is it still has the awful combat from Breath of the Wild.
I
So like
want to get
whenever
rid
I
of
get
weapon
more battles,
degradation. That's what I'd like to
I
get
don't.
rid of.
To me, that's not the biggest issue. To me, it's just like combat just doesn't feel fun.
Yeah, that's fair.
Um,
I
like
do
fighting.
have a question. I do have a question. Why? Because I love this game. Just to be very clear,
Yeah.
from what I've
Oh
played, I
yeah.
love
Yeah.
this game. I
Very
haven't finished it because it's massive and there's so much to do. But what I don't understand, and maybe it's just a Nintendo thing, is I feel like, and maybe I'm just being a bit hyperbolic, but I feel like if anybody else had made a game that allowed you to do the things that this game allows you to do, which is essentially break the game in many ways, people would just call it a broken game and say it was bad. But because Nintendo have done it in a certain way, it doesn't seem to get that same, like, nobody thinks this is a broken
Yeah,
game.
I don't think there's ever an answer to that kind of question because you'd have to remove yourself from the conversation so deep that just that would be impossible to
Yeah.
do.
Well, what
But I
I
mean,
wondered is, does it come down to that thing I was saying earlier a little bit about Forspoken and how the dialogue was intentional? Is it because when you can see something is intentional, you're able to view it in a different way? You know, because like if a
yeah,
game if a game being able to be broken is part of the design and part of the way that they want you to play the game, then you can't really criticize it for that, right? And that's the
yeah,
wonder of this game. Like one of the most amazing things that I saw with this game was people talking about, oh, how did you do this shrine? And I did it completely differently to you, you know, and all that kind of stuff was it was just amazing, you know.
I think a lot of it comes down to where you can't kind of beta test for everything. So I think like a lot of the like, oh, this game's broken, or like, well, they're patching a lot of that stuff. Um, but yeah, because like it's again, like it's still a very, very good game. I think the amount of freedom that it kind of gives you to kind of tackle the shrines or the world at large comes down to a lot of its kind of impressive building stuff. Like it's a lot of the vehicle stuff. It kind of pulls from like Banjo Kazooie, but Nuts and Bolts, I think was the title. Um, so like it is still a very good game, especially on the Switch. Like I'm amazed that the thing is still like what 16 gigs or something. It's super tiny.
And
But I'm still surprised
the
that
fact that it runs
Switch
as
can
well
run.
as it does on the Switch as well is you
And
know.
that is because of Monolith Soft. Um, like that team keeps giving. That game would probably not run near as good if it wasn't for the
That's
development
true.
studios.
That is true.
But yeah, it's absolutely it's fantastic. I mean, I don't think we really need to say too much about it because everybody's already kind of already played it in some respect. Really, the review is up on the site.
Yes.
Um, I think it's fantastic. Moving from fantastic to the opposite of fantastic is the Lord of the Rings Golem. This
What
was
are
a
you
game that
talking
was so
about?
successful that the studio shut down.
This is literally the best video game ever made, is it not?
I mean, if it's the only video game you've ever played, then sure, I can see that argument.
Oh
Um,
god. I would
Lord of the
love
Rings
to know.
Golem.
Do you know what I would love? I would love one day for there to be some sort of no clip documentary on this game and figure out what actually happened because
I'm just waiting for the what happened from Matt
because
McMuscle.
because my god,
for me.
it's just kind of like I've only seen this game. I haven't played it, but it feels like they wanted to make something very different, or they had a vision that they didn't have the resources to execute on.
Well, this was a studio that was doing like point and click adventures and all sorts of stuff. So them to make their first big like full 3D world and stuff like that. Like there's promise, but it is a game that is just well beyond their scope. They were punching way above their weight. Um, Moving on to I never played the System Shock remaster. I want to because it looks super fun.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Showgunners, which is kind of like XCOM meets Smash TV, where it's kind of like it plays like XCOM, but it's done in the like a televised prison, where essentially you're fighting other inmates and stuff as you kind of like do it for like riches and fame. And that game
Yes.
is utterly fantastic. I think there's a demo. Try it; it is great. Um, June is massive.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes, it is.
got Street Fighter 6, which is one of the best entries pretty much ever in the series. It plays incredibly fun. It's got a deep and rewarding roster.
Yeah.
The World Tour mode is
And
unique and bizarre.
they also did the right thing in it for not only for more casual players but for accessibility of there are now different ways to play the game, you know, and
Yeah, it's kind of like a more button focused version of the Street Fighter game that they had for the DS, where you had like some combo and moves attached to buttons for the bottom screen.
mhm,
This one here has modern and classic controls where modern it removes the ability of performing some moves by making the inputs that you have um, a
more
little bit easier to
simplistic.
work on.
Yeah.
So, like Zangief, for example, he lacks some of his best moves are not accessible through modern. They're only available through classic, but modern allows you to um, pull off the majority of his arsenal in much quicker fashion. And there's some characters that play better modern than classic and vice versa, because
Yes.
again, like modern does remove the ability to pull off certain characters. Giles, another character, as far as I know, that gets nerfed pretty much when you play modern. It removes some of his key moves. But aside from the super expensive Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles DLC, that game has made a lot of really good headway. The World Tour mode is pretty interesting. I don't think it's amazing. I would have rather had a Mortal Kombat like story mode,
Yeah.
but Street Fighter 6 is still top of its game. Absolutely fantastic. Diablo 4 was the next one to come out, and that was extremely good, visually, gameplay wise.
So I have a
Um,
few things to say about this game. I think that before season 1 existed, this game would have seriously been in the conversation for game of the year. I think that it
yeah,
was I think the base game was that strong in terms of even the story, right? And like even the story was interesting to me and the lore and all that kind of stuff. And that's something that's never ever grabbed me about Diablo before. And Diablo 4 is the first Diablo game where I actually enjoy it as much playing by myself as I do playing with other people.
yeah,
The issue for me is that once you finish the game, once you finish the main story, it becomes very, very grindy, which is fine because I get that part of it. I get that that's part of the Diablo experience. But then you have what happened with season 1, which is like, okay, we're going to add these heart things, but they're kind of just like another version of gems that are already in the game.
yeah.
Um, so they're not really a significant change, and we're going to nerf a lot of the best classes that people have already built up, and we're going to kind of change the entire meta in a way of the game. And I think that even I think not only that, but you can tell that they know they messed up for how quickly they responded. And since then, the game has just sort of fallen off a cliff. Like after about after about the first week of season 1, no one was talking about the game anymore. And yet it dominated conversations for probably the longest period of any game this year, up to a certain point. um,
Yeah.
yeah, I
No,
really really liked it, but I just think that being that sort of live service that they want it to be, they haven't quite nailed stuff with that yet, and they need to improve. But if I was purely thinking about the base game certainly will be in my top 10 this year, if not my top 5.
yeah, it was super fun. We had Layers of Fear, which was the Unreal 5 remake of the first two game and all of its expansions, and it's quite good. All the new content that they added was actually pretty decent. So it's definitely one to check out for sure. Aliens: Dark Descent. That was their like full spectrum warrior version of Alien, where you essentially control your units and tell them where to go, and then they will act on their own their behalf. Um, Excellent use of the Aliens license. The characters were instantly likable and memorable, like the sound effects and the music and everything on that game. Um, the absolutely fantastic soundtrack by I believe it was Austin Wintory. Um, very very good game. Final Fantasy 16. I got pretty far in this and then I stopped. I just had too much coming out and I stopped playing it. But you beat it.
I didn't stop, and so I'll say my short version first, because Final Fantasy fans will understand this. Final Fantasy 16, for me, as someone who came much later to the franchise, 15 was actually the first one that I played. And obviously I've played 7 Remake, and then 16 is the third. 16 is my Final Fantasy 7. And Final Fantasy fans will understand what that means. But for people that don't, Final Fantasy 16 is basically Final Fantasy crossed with Game of Thrones, and that is wonderful to me. It had this really kind of human, personal drama in the story, but this political edge to it between all these different kingdoms, with this overarching threat to the entire world as well. And there isn't a character in the game that I disliked. All the performances were really strong. And there were actually multiple scenes, and this doesn't happen to me very often, but there were multiple scenes that actually brought tears to my eyes. And when that happens to me, I know the story is actually impacting me. You know, I know that it's actually making me feel something beyond just when I'm playing the game. And there aren't many games that can do that. Like, off the top of my head, the last game that I had tears at before this was probably Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, you know, and that's a different level of storytelling. But yeah, I loved what I loved about it as well is that the gameplay here was essentially Devil May Cry, but a little bit easier and not so focused on having to maintain combos and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
I thought that was a really smart way to go, and gameplay always felt engaging, but it was maybe a little bit more. It was a little too simplistic come the end, because what happens is you end up finding 2 or 3 attacks that you really really like, and then you never use anything else, and that's kind of all you ever do.
That's what I found.
Um, but yeah, story wise, this game will remain with me for a long time, and I wish that I could get a direct sequel to it, because I want more of this world and these characters. Um, because yeah, they're phenomenal, and
Yeah.
I really do
For
recommend it
me,
to people.
it falls under the same kind of category as like Final Fantasy Origin, Let's Go Kill Chaos.
Hmm.
Um, is that it works extremely good for the type of game that it is, but for me, it's both of them feel like they don't belong as a main series title because again, like this is a character action
Yeah.
light RPG,
I
and I
mean,
think the story and
this
characters are
16 is basically not an RPG. You like,
not at all
I don't mean to criticize, and anyone who thinks it
criticize
is,
away.
that's fine because those elements are there. But I actually say in my review that the elements are so light touch that they might as well not be in the game because you can
God of War
completely
Ragnarok
ignore them.
is more of an RPG
It really is. It
Final
really
Fantasy 16
is.
was. It's
Yeah.
like you can equip like a couple items, and some of them are accessibility based, which is absolute bullshit.
Yeah, I know. You
Um,
shouldn't have to use an
and
item slot for an accessibility option.
yeah, like there's what was it? Sea of Stars has the same kind of thing, but it's menu driven. It's not anything else. But yeah, Final Fantasy 16 for me is like it's great for what it does, but for me it just does not feel like a main series game because I think it is such a
Yeah.
departure.
What I would
But the
say
stuff that it does well is very, very well.
what I would say is at the time that I played and reviewed it, and I think this was only my second review for our site, um, at the time, it would if I had to give my game of the year around that time, it would have been my game of the year. Part of that is because there are other games I haven't finished yet, and obviously this one I did finish. It took me about 50 hours from memory to kind of finish the main story with some side quests thrown in there as well. Um, and yeah, it would have been my game of the year. It no longer is because I've finished more games since then, and obviously we've all been through this. Like when you first play a game and finish it, how you feel about it immediately is always slightly different to how you'll feel about it when you look back on it in retrospect a few weeks or a few months down the line. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's another game coming up that is currently my front runner for game of the year.
So we'll kind of trim through some of these. AEW Fight Forever. That game was fine for a couple days.
Yeah, I
I
agree. I don't have more.
encourage it.
I don't really have more to say about it other than if you were a fan of the N64 wrestling games, you will probably enjoy it. But it doesn't have the content there to really sustain any
The character
long-term
creator
playing
is
time.
absolutely a waste.
Yeah.
Um, Dave the Diver played this game. Unbelievably good. I did not know what to expect. It's a restaurant sim with like roguelike elements. So you go down into the water, you collect your things, you come back up, you run a sushi store for the sushi restaurant for the night, and then you just go right back
I
down.
really want to play this game. I just haven't yet.
It is fantastic. The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. So this is the 10th game, I think, in the series, and this ties up the plot threads that we're building during the Crossbell arc, as well as the Trails of Cold Steel games. I didn't think the story was as impactful as I kind of wanted. It definitely is still a fantastic game, and if you are a fan of the Legends of Heroes series, dive into it. If you haven't, you got a lot of homework. Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals. I like the first one. I just haven't got a chance to play this one at all.
Yeah.
Um, but it definitely looks like it kind of follows that same kind of baseline. Exo Primal. I played and reviewed this one. This was again, like it's one of those games that it's fun for a couple days and then you will probably never touch it again. It's kind of like their
Thank
live
God it was on Game
service.
Pass.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I wouldn't even played it had it not been. But it's still fun for what it is. Like um, it's not really their Overwatch, but it follows a lot of the same kind of like character dynamics and stuff. But you basically shoot at a whole bunch of dinosaurs, and you can play against players, or you can play against like um, uh, there's a mode where the last round would be against actual players, but you can turn that off and you can just have it against just AI. That game was fun for what it is. I might eventually at some point go back into it, but Pikmin 4 released. I'm not a fan of the series, but I know it's been getting a lot of really, really good
So I
reviews.
am a big fan, but I haven't yet played this game. So I
Yeah.
can't speak to it. But what I will say is, from what I've seen of it, it seems like they've made some kind of smart tweaks that people have been asking for from the series for a long time. Um, and I haven't heard a bad thing about it yet. So I think in typical Nintendo fashion, they just know their audience very well and they understand who this game is for, and they've made it for them.
Remnant 2.
Okay,
Um,
now we have to speak about this game, and
yeah,
I
this
want
game is
what
really, really good.
what I want to say, where I want to start, because I played most of this game in co-op with you because I have not played the game before this, and
Yeah.
so I had no real idea what I was doing. I knew that this was a good game because I didn't. I did get a code. We actually both got codes for this game. Um, I didn't get mine till a little bit later though, and yeah, what I would say is it has one of the best boss fights that I've ever played in a video game, and yet
Hmm.
this boss fight is also one of the most simple but cleverly designed boss fights that I've ever seen. And I'm not gonna spoil what it is because it really was magical. Like we were there, you know. We tried this boss probably about 5 times, Jeff, before we beat it on my playthrough here, and it's like Jeff sent me in because he was like, I want to see if you can figure out what to do before I even help you. And it was one of those things where I immediately looked at it and understood what the game wanted me to do. But you're figuring out this massive puzzle around you at the same time in this really strange way, and it just I don't know, it was magical. Like I can't describe it any other way that was magical, and it was just this idea of like the entire game outside of this boss fight. One, it plays very well. The guns feel good to use. Um, the procedural generation is used in a really smart way, where it's like, will there were areas when Jeff was helping me play through the game that he hadn't seen before, but they were also similar to areas that he had seen, or they were connecting to areas that he had been to. So we could find our way to certain things by figuring out where we were, and it for me it's one of the most smart uses of procedural generation in a game that I've seen so far.
Yeah. For full disclosure, I didn't get a code. I purchased the game. You had got a code. I wasn't able to track one down.
Ah, yes, okay.
Um, but yeah, like Remnant 2 is fantastic. Like it improves upon the first game considerably. The bosses are really enjoyable. I will say the last boss is garbage. It is the worst boss in that game. But no, it's really good. I think the story just needs to be improved upon for the next one. I think the way that the story kind of plays out and where it goes is fine. But it's the gameplay that absolutely sells that game, and like the structure of how that game is kind of constructed is very cool.
And what I like about the game as well is it it does have a focus on obviously multiplayer and cooperative play because it wants you
Yeah.
to play with friends, but you can play it on your own, and that is that is possible. But also because of the way the game works, it's really easy to jump in and out of. And we had like random people jumping into our game and helping us
Yeah.
for a bit, and then they would disappear, and all that kind of stuff. It was a really really fun multiplayer experience. It is a game that I haven't finished yet, but I think it came out during quite a busy time, and that was just the reason that I didn't finish it. I do want to go back and play more of it though. So again, it's one of those where it's like I still have the game installed, and when I've got a free evening or two away from some other reviews, then
Yeah.
I will play the rest of it.
We also had Double Dragon Gaiden, which is super fun to play. If you like TMNT Shredder's Revenge, you'll really want to dive into that. Very, very good game. Um, Also had Baldur's Gate 3 release on PC. I'm playing this on PS5 right now. We were originally going to have a review out for it, but my reviewer ended up getting sick and a bunch of other life matters and stuff. So I've jumped onto the game through PS5 and just at the beginning of Act 3. So I've got probably about another 30 or 40 hours. Um, I'll talk more about it once I've had a chance to actually complete the game. But if
What
it continues to do what it's doing, it will be my game of the year.
I was going to say, what I would like to know, Jeff, is without spoilers, so far from what you've played, is it as good as people say it is?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like this is the type of game that you can go about things almost any way you want. The way that the dice rolls, the way that like if you save scum, you can kind of get around certain things because like there's not just the dice rolls that you're doing for actions and stuff. There's dice rolls that are happening based off your stats. So if your perception roll doesn't work, you're not going to understand something a character said, so that means that a dialogue option won't be present. But
Okay,
if you
that
get
makes
that
sense.
perception check, like there's a perception check that you make where a character is like talking about something. And if you get that perception check, you then have an additional line of dialogue that correlates to something that you are wanting to say. But if you don't get that check, that line is not there, and you are just given the static ones.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
it is unbelievably good.
Cause this is a
I will say
game.
the PS5 version is buggy as hell though.
Yeah, so this is a game that basically I fully intend to play, but because I'm hoping to play it with people and the majority of people I know who want to play it are waiting for the Xbox version, I'm going to wait for that at this point. When you said that you were picking it up on PS5, I did consider. I was like, do I get it? Um,
Yeah, the one thing I'll say with multiplayer though is like you really have to invest into that whole game in co-op if you are going to play it in co-op. It's
yeah,
not the type of thing that you'll want to like play for 10 hours then your co-op partner joins because you'll want to have a mercenary join that has that look and the feel of what that other
yeah,
person wants because
yeah,
you're playing in that person's world.
yeah.
So I don't think I'll ever play it in co-op. I don't think I would want to have that experience be um, shared with someone else. As weird as that sounds.
I know what you mean.
Um,
Is almost like one of those where you have to commit to. If you're going to play it in co-op, you need to play the whole
yeah,
thing in co-op with the same people.
because I save scum like crazy, so I would just frustrate whoever I'm playing with. But yeah, like well, you know, when I've had a chance to actually beat it and we have the review out, we'll talk more in depth on it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Atlas Fallen. So we both checked this game out.
Enjoyed
Atlas
it.
Fallen. It's fun. Like for what it is, it's super fun. Like I went through the game twice
Yeah, you
before
did.
review.
You did because I
And
think what happened was we both got the game because I was reviewing it for Outer Haven and you
yeah,
for us, and you finished it before me because I think I was actually ill at the time, and then
yeah.
and then it was like, oh, I need to try and finish this game in basically 3 days. And you were like, yeah, I can get you through it. And you just
Oh yeah. We'll stream. We'll streamline it. We'll take the golden path. And yeah, it's fun. Like it's the type of game that if you watch a trailer, and you're like, hey, that looks like Darksiders. It very much is Darksiders. It's Darksiders 2 in
my only
every way.
real issue with the game was just that the presentation was dated. If it looked better, and I mean I have other issues, but my main issue with the game was like it felt like I was playing an Xbox 360 game and not in a good
Yeah.
way. Um I don't have an issue with games that look slightly older and things like that. They don't have to be the best looking game ever. But
Mm.
when I'm playing a game in 2023 that looks like it came out, 15 years ago, that is going to be somewhat off-putting because
Yeah,
you
like
don't
it's
really
definitely a
expect
small
that.
team, but I mean most studios now have like access to like some pretty decent tools,
Yeah.
and like the human characters in the game just don't look great, but everything else
And the
does.
weird
Like
thing is, some of the because they do some really nice looking cutscenes, right? Like actual cutscenes. And I get that those can always look better, but it's like if you have the assets to do these things, then you've got to have assets between whatever these are and what you actually used in the game because yeah, it's crazy.
yeah,
But I did
no,
enjoy
like
it though. It's got very enjoyable gameplay, and the combat has this momentum based system that was really interesting.
yeah, it was still a pretty pretty damn fun game. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So
Really
this
enjoyed
was
this.
very very good game. Like it's the same publisher and like studio that made Friday the 13th, but it's a different developer because this is Sumo Digital.
Yes,
Um, and visually, it looks fantastic. Gameplay wise, it's great. The variety between all the characters are really good. I just kind of wish you could still select a character and then go into matchmaking,
I agree.
as opposed to fighting for the character that you want in a lobby and then not getting it and then leaving.
Yeah.
But yeah, the you play as three
This is
members of the family
this is
or
my
four
favorite.
survivors.
So it's 4 versus 3, which is obviously slightly different to these other kind of asymmetrical horror games that have been
Yeah,
around. But this is my favorite one of all of them so far. Something about this one just clicked with me, and I think it's because at least in my experience, it's equally as fun to play as a member of the family or a victim. And I don't
yeah,
think that that's true of every single one of these games.
yeah. Yeah, it's like if you like Dead by Daylight and Friday the 13th and Predator, it's definitely one of the better versions of those games. Hopefully the content continues to go. I hope that they add more survivors or family members or whatever the case is. But it's quite good, and the progression system is pretty solid. It feels like you're constantly making like it's constantly a game of inches essentially. Um, I think we're checking out. Immortals of Avium, we've already kind of talked about that one.
Yes.
Uh, uh, what is potentially my game of the year right now until Baldur's Gate 3, until I beat that, which might take it. But Armored Core 6 is unbelievably good. I kind of lucked out and got a code. Um,
Nice.
and it's my first Bandai Namco code. And
Thank you to
this game
Bandai
is
for Jeff's code.
Oh yeah, From Software. This is their other studio. This is while they were making Elden Ring essentially. And Armored Core 6 is fantastic. Like it is the mech game I kind of always wanted. It some of its controls are a little fidgety at the start, but it takes a little while to get going, and then making like a build to essentially get through some of these bosses, and some of those bosses are incredibly hard. But then once you kind of like work out those systems about getting a good build, you kind of just melt through a lot of stuff. Like double shotguns. Oh my god, I was just messing up things.
So I've seen
Um,
quite a lot of this game. Haven't played it yet. Definitely want to play it, but I think it's one of those where because I'm not certain that I'll enjoy it,
yeah,
I'll probably wait for it to go on some sort of sale or get it around Christmas time, or who knows, it's my birthday next week. I might even get it then. Um but yeah, it's definitely one that I will play. It's one that I never really had a doubt would be good because From Software have reached that point now where I will never expect them to have a bad game anymore. Do you know what I mean? It
yeah,
it at some point a studio reaches a level of consistency where a bad game is an unexpected thing, and I think they are there. They are so consistent. Like before this, their last two releases as a studio both won Game of the Year. So you know, and I think they're the first studio ever to do that, where they actually won Game of the Year two releases in a row. Um, I don't know if
Yeah,
Armored Core 6 is going to keep that run going, but it's
I don't think it
certainly.
will. I don't think it'll be in the contention for like the popular
Yeah.
consensus, but
But it certainly
it is
sounds like a very good game.
unbelievably good.
Yeah, that's good.
Next up was Sea of Stars, which
I
I
haven't played
enjoyed.
this yet. I haven't played this yet.
I enjoyed quite a bit.
Yeah.
But like that kind of game, I do like Chained Echoes consistently better. I think it's just because Sea of Stars, like I didn't like the characters or story until about 8 hours in,
Oh,
and even
interesting.
then,
Okay.
like the characters I think are fine. I like the pirate, or sorry, the assassin girl. I like her the most. I didn't like the main characters at all. They felt like they were the same character. Like if you put your hand over the dialogue box to
Oh wow,
block their
you
name
wouldn't
out,
know.
you wouldn't know because they're designed around being the same character. But
Interesting.
and the gameplay is really really good. It does fall into that thing where like the first hour of gameplay is everything that the game offers.
Makes
Um,
sense.
but it's super fun. Like it's definitely worthy of the praise that it's getting.
Good,
But if you
good.
like that game,
And it's
do
also the
check out
first game
Echoes.
ever, from my recollection at least, to release on both Game Pass and PlayStation Plus day one.
Yeah, I think PlayStation Plus was like probably tossed them some money
Yeah.
to make that happen.
Well, I think they did right
Uh,
because it had been announced as being a Game Pass day one game way before,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
kind of like 2 weeks before it was coming out or something, they said, "Oh,
pretty
now it's on PlayStation Plus day one as well."
much. Yeah, quickly, Oceanhorn 2, if you're looking for like a Zelda style like game, like classic Zelda, but classic 3D Zeldas like Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time. Definitely worth checking out. Its mobile roots, unfortunately, do kind of paint it in a bad picture. You can definitely feel that this was an Apple Arcade game first, um, but still super, super good. I really, really enjoyed it. September, so we had Starfield, and you
September.
liked it. You liked it way more than I did.
Yeah.
Um, my my biggest issues with Starfield is it never feels like I'm actually discovering anything. Like my headline for the review is to boldly go where everyone apparently has already been before. Because every place you go, humanity has already had contact. And they're like, you have to collect these um, relics that essentially kind of like unlock something in your brain. And you're not even the first person to do that.
Yeah.
The moment you do that, you meet up with someone who's like, "Oh, I had the same thing." I'm like, "So I'm not the first person to explore this."
Yeah.
And then when you get those relics, they're like, "Oh, we have to go and track them down." I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna go and discover them." Oh no, we already know where they are. You just go to the objective marker, and then they unlock these temples. Oh, we've never seen them before. Okay, I'll go discover them. No, we already know where they are. Here, go there.
Yeah.
That was the biggest issue with the game. Other than that, I love the combat. I love the worlds that they do.
Yeah.
I like the characters and stuff. The ship stuff got
So
eventually better.
for me, I think there's a few reasons that I liked it as much as I did. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. For Outer Haven, which would have been a 9 out of 10 for us. That's probably what I
Yeah,
would have given it as well if I was doing our review. You, I think,
yeah,
went for a 7.5, right? Um, and what I do want to start by saying is Starfield's one of those odd games where I actually understand every single criticism that exists of the game. I just think that it's one of those where, because of how the game works, your mileage will vary so much depending purely on how you're playing it and how you're interacting with the game. Um, And what I found is that the more I played the game, the more I enjoyed it. And I actually am still playing it now. I'm on my third New Game Plus run, which I won't spoil for people because I actually do think the way that they handle New Game Plus and what it adds to the lore of the game and what it adds in terms of future possibilities
Yeah.
is one of the
And
most interesting things I've seen.
adding on that too, if you see anyone going like, oh, go through the main story and blitz through it to get to New Game Plus, don't. Don't, because New Game Plus has the option of being a very different experience than your first experience.
Yeah,
And to deny yourself of going through and doing all that stuff,
yeah.
because like the way that New Game Plus handles is it isn't necessarily the same experience that you've had.
No.
It can be, that is one of the
And
options,
also, the other thing
but
about New
it's
Game Plus as
very different.
well is it's not even really New Game Plus. Like, the way I described it to someone is the story of Starfield, without me spoiling it, the story of Starfield never really finishes because of how they handle New Game Plus. And you'll
Yeah.
understand that when you get there. But that is why the I can understand when people from Bethesda turned round and sort of said the game doesn't really start until you finish the main quest, because I get what they mean. I don't think, like in this case, I don't think that was just marketing BS. I think that is genuinely how they feel, in that there is a significant twist in the game that you will know before you even get to the New Game Plus point. If you're paying attention to the main story, you will know
Yeah.
what it's going to be. Um,
Yeah, and like even the main story, like I like the characters, I like some of the moments and stuff, but like the main story for me, like paled in comparison to some of the stories that you find out in the world. Like that
I
Crimson Fleet quest.
oh yeah,
If
yeah, yeah.
that was not in the game, yeah, this would have been an easy 7 for me. That
Oh,
that very moment, that whole quest is my favorite thing that game does because it has amazing characters, it has
yeah.
great pacing, it has great moments.
So
Like it does everything that's good about that game
yeah,
in that quest.
and I do, and that's one thing I want to talk about because you mentioned pacing there, and I actually think that that's one of two significant issues with this game. I think the pacing, especially in the early hours of the game, is very bad. Like, I actually think it's bad. Uh,
It's same as Fallout 4, where it's like your baby's taken from you, and then you get out of the pod, you're like, I have to go find that baby. And that's the most important thing. And also you're like, oh wait, I can garden? I can build an
yeah,
outpost? The
and it's
baby.
weird because the way they've, what I find odd about this Bethesda game in particular is I do think they've designed it in a way where they actually are trying to force you to play the main quest as much as possible early on. But because
Yeah.
Bethesda games aren't generally designed that way, I think that most people are trying to play them how they'd always play them. And it's kind of
Mhm.
like that's two different design things rubbing up on each other. So, as much
Yeah.
as I do agree that I wouldn't power through the entire main quest, there I would say play it until a quest called Into the Unknown. And once you've finished that quest, if you're if at that point you're not starting to get some interest in the main story, go off and do other things and come back later. Um,
Mhm.
and obviously, if you are getting interested, you might feel like you want to continue, and that's fine. But I would say it makes sense because of how the game works and because of how slow it will be otherwise. It's worth mainlining the game in those opening hours to actually get to the point where the quest feels a bit more significant, and you're not just meeting new characters, and it's not just like, oh, go and find these things, but we don't really know what they are yet. So right now you're lacking the actual
But we know where they
motivation.
all are. Yeah, like I think the game is great.
Yeah,
It just fought me
yeah.
on along the
And
way.
it's also the other thing I do want to say about it, because there is one other major negative, which I think is the thing that's actually impacting most people's experience. Is that the game does a terrible job, like probably the worst job I've seen of explaining things. And one example I'd give to you is that people have been complaining that, you know, it's a very menu heavy game and you have to go into the menu to kind of travel to a solar system, then back into the menu to
All space travel is just a menu.
land on a planet and all this stuff. And that is true, but it can somewhat be alleviated by the fact that you can immediately fast travel to somewhere if you've been there before,
But the
without having to
stupid thing,
open the
though,
menu twice.
yeah, and the stupid thing though is like if I want to go to Neon, I have to find a quest that takes me to Neon so I can fast travel it. Because honestly, I have no idea where Neon is.
That's
I couldn't tell you
interesting.
on the space map where it
That's
is. There's no
interesting.
favorites list of like where
Yeah,
to
because
go.
you
Like
can't
if you want to
mark
select
anything
Neon.
either, right? Like you can custom
Nope.
mark things, but it's not in that
So
way.
I had no idea how to get back to New Atlantis at one point
Yeah.
because I had no objective
Um
markers.
but what I mean is like the game just doesn't explain things very well. For example, it tells you that you can fast travel back to your ship using your scanner, right? But the game
Yeah,
never tells you that you can also fast travel to any previously visited point of interest on a planet using the scanner. It doesn't ever tell
yeah,
you that, and yet you can do it. And this is what I mean. I
yeah.
think
The
a lot of
UI is
people's
weird.
a lot of people's niggling problems with the game are actually solved with better explanation of some of the systems. And I think that
Yeah,
is a big like I was, it's like people have said, "Oh, there's not really a map." Yes, there is a map. It's just that people don't really understand how to use it because the game doesn't explain it. The map is a compass.
yeah.
It has markers on it. It also, you can actually get a marker on the floor during a quest using your scanner, but because the game never tells you that, you would never find it unless you found it by accident.
Yeah, it's like most of the shops in New Atlantis. Like, I don't understand why New Atlantis, Aquila, Neon, and the one on Mars,
Mm.
they need like
They need
street
local
maps.
maps. Yeah, they need local maps.
They need local maps like crazy. And the sad thing is like Bethesda made them and provided them for guides.
That's crazy.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like it's just one of those games where it's like to me it's an absolutely stellar game with so many problems
Yeah.
that just fought me. Like I had so many
And
glitches. New Game Plus didn't even unlock for me. Like I had to go back in and do that whole
yeah.
last dialogue choice to get New Game Plus to lock because it just
Mm.
went right back to the main menu.
And
It
that's
didn't
the
do
funniest
anything.
thing is I had one glitch in this entire game, and it was during a main quest where I had a choice to go to one place or another place. I
Yeah.
went to one place and then I had to travel back to the first place, but the game wouldn't let me land. Luckily, traveling away from the solar system and then coming back again immediately fixed it. But that was
Yeah.
literally a main quest, and that could have been a game breaking bug, right? Obviously, it wasn't. The only thing I had other than that, which would occur a lot, was clipping. Whether that be people clipping into walls and getting stuck,
I all the time.
or that kind of thing. But what I will
I had a
say
platform. I
But what
fell
I
right
will
through into
say
the
is, I think part of the reason that I didn't feel as negative about that stuff is because by Bethesda's standards, I actually think
Oh
this
yeah.
was the most polished Bethesda game that I've ever played
Oh
at
for sure.
launch. And that says a lot,
Yeah,
you know.
there was a part in Fallout 4, I think. It might have been 3, I'm not sure, where an entire rooftop it had no collision detection, so you just fall to your death. So I had to take like med kits and like throw them on the roof and then hop on the med kit. And then eventually I just packed my health so much that I jumped down and broke my legs and then healed, and then I was able to progress. And like I had a spot like when you're playing the Crimson Steel or Crimson Fleet quest, and you're in that prison trying to find what's his name's documents and stuff. There was a platform that you had to go down that had no collision detection, and you just fall. But I had a ton of glitches. Like out of the I don't know 60 or 70 hours, I can't remember how long I played. I
Mm.
probably had a glitch pretty much about every half hour, an hour.
That's really frustrating. Yeah, I
I had
definitely had a
invisible
much better.
guns.
I definitely
Yeah,
had a much
but
better technical experience than that.
wrapping up here, we've got the Crew Motorfest.
We
All I
both played
basically
this.
need to say on that is if you like Forza Horizon, you'll like Brew Motorfest. It's basically that. The playlists are cool. They definitely give you a little bit more flavor than you normally find in
Yeah.
Horizon. Um, yeah, Payday 3 Crash and Burn. It's barely playable, I guess. Um, I'm currently playing Liza Pete. Actually just playing that just before the
Nice.
podcast here,
How is it
and
so far?
it's very cool. It's Bloodborne 2, really. It's what everybody's kind of wanted. It plays just like that.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
It's really good. There was a patch that came out that made some things easier, so I was able to beat the boss I was stuck at. So I think I've got about 3 or 4 major areas left.
Nice. Nice.
Um, Mortal Kombat 1,
I've played this.
which
Love it.
is a reboot and a reboot. I mean, it's just like it's like one thing I like about it about this, and the same thing that they did with Mortal Kombat 9 is like it's a full reboot, but it's done in a way where it pulls from the previous fiction.
Yeah.
So it's not just a from the ground reboot, it's a reboot of the timeline based on the person who resets the timeline. So in Mortal Kombat 9, Raiden sent a message to himself in the past saying, let him win. Now, he could have said, let Shao Kahn win, but no, he was an idiot. And he ends up getting like so many people killed to the point where they all become remnants, and then they come back in Mortal Kombat 11, and then like Chronica changes the timeline and all sorts of stuff, and then Liu Kang essentially, like if you play Aftermath, defeats Chronica and essentially resets the timeline for Mortal Kombat 1.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
this is placing people like Quan Chi and Shang Tsung as regular folk. Then something happens and
Yes,
it
it does.
undoes some of that. And the thing that happens, and I'm not going to say it, is the thing that was the question that I had after Aftermath was done. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. What about this? And they kind of play around with that fiction to the point where I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, this is exactly what I wanted from that storyline.
And also,
And
what I will say is,
it's
I'm not going to
great.
spoil anything for anybody, but the final bit of the story was actually really fun to play, and it's something that I'll probably play multiple times. Just that final bit. And
Yeah.
also stick around because there is a post-credit scene. Um, so if you're
Yeah, I don't
into the
know
story
how
and all,
important that one's going to be, but yeah.
I feel like if it's
One thing
in
I'll,
there, it's going to be important, right? Because why have it there
yeah,
otherwise?
it's just sort of a weird choice of like if that's going to be the next thing.
Yeah.
But the one thing I will say is like when you beat the main story and you fight the last two and you defeat the last two and the story cuts ends, immediately go into the tower thing, pick the easiest tower, pick whatever characters you want, beat it. The way that you defeat those last two characters is immensely better than the way that you defeat those two characters in the story mode. It is night and day better.
Oh
Like I
wow.
was literally
Okay.
going, "Oh wait a minute, this is new. This is new." I'm like, "Oh my god!" And I was literally cheering. I'm like, "This is what I wanted from how to defeat those two characters." It is unbelievably cool.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. I haven't done
But it's
that
good.
yet,
Like
so I'll
it's got
have to
the
do that.
do it. Unbelievable. Just pick easy mode, the smallest tower, and it is a way better finish to those two characters than what we got in the game. Um, but it's got the invasion mode, which is kind of like their way that they did the crypt, which is interesting but very grindy. Um, the multiplayer is still fantastic. It still plays like Mortal Kombat, even though they've changed certain things. They got the cameo characters, which bring characters from different timelines to be your sidekick kind of assist. So you get like Mortal Kombat 1 Sonya, but you also get Mortal Kombat 3 Sonya, I think, with her outfit. That stuff's all great. I mean, it's Mortal Kombat. if you have not liked Mortal Kombat, you're not gonna like Mortal Kombat. If you like Mortal Kombat, then it's more of that. It's just way more refined. It's uh, I think visually it looks pretty much the same as Mortal Kombat 11, which is weird that they skipped Xbox One and PS4. I mean, Switch got a absolute horrible release, but
It
the fact
did.
that they couldn't optimize it for Xbox One and PS4 that have the biggest audiences, they were just like the WB's got to be kicking themselves on sales
I mean,
because
it
that game
seems like a
sold like
silly choice
13 million
because
copies.
if they were gonna go for a Switch version anyway, then why not?
Yeah,
Because the last gen
and one
consoles,
doesn't look that much better than 11.
yeah, yeah, I know. So
Like it would be different if it was like a massive jump in visuals, but I don't think it really is. Like it's better for
yeah, it's
sure,
definitely better,
but I
but
don't think
not.
it's
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that.
um the last couple ones here I have for September, just because like October has just kind of started. Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty is out. The 2.0 patch is free, but the Phantom Liberty patch is about 40 bucks Canadian.
Yes.
I've heard it's extremely good.
So I am playing a little bit of it. I haven't finished it yet, so I will hold off on kind of thought, like overall thoughts. But it is very good, and it actually one thing it does very well is in gameplay terms and in the scenarios that it puts you in, it leans into what the gameplay of Cyberpunk does very well, and it doesn't try and make you do different things. Um, it's basically like playing an action movie, essentially.
Then we had EA Sports FC 24. Did you review that one?
I did, so I reviewed that one for Outer Haven. It's a strong enough game as with most of these sports games,
This is the
especially.
first where it's not FIFA.
Yeah. So obviously my headline for the review was same game different name, right? Because it's largely the same, and there's definitely been some presentational tweaks that make it look better, and more simplistic menus and tweaks to modes that kind of try to freshen them up a bit. But ultimately, the content on offer is still largely the same, and therefore,
Mhm.
if you played last year's FIFA 23, you don't necessarily need to rush out and buy FC 24. Although there are some significant gameplay changes. The issue that I had with the game, and the reason I rate it lower than last year's game, is that it has more technical issues than I've ever seen for an EA football game. And admittedly, I reviewed it during the early access period, so some of those technical issues may now have been fixed. But for
Mhm.
example, I'm playing a manager career mode, and I've gone into a cutscene to try and buy a player from another team, and the manager is basically just his head, and the rest of him is completely invisible, and he's just like a floating head sat there on a sofa, and that's never ever happened before. And these are exactly the same cutscenes that were in last year's game, so it doesn't even really make sense. But
Yeah.
overall,
Uh,
overall, it's a good game, and it's if you're someone who buys it every year, then this one is like it's no less worth buying. It's just that if you know if you're kind of someone who wants to wait for bigger changes, this is a year that you can afford to skip, because the biggest change this year is the name, essentially.
yeah. But so today we had reviews drop for Forza Motorsport, so that's the next one coming from Microsoft for October.
Yes. And I
We had
believe I
Assassin's
believe
Creed.
I'll be reviewing that for us, right? But
Yeah,
but I don't have a code, unfortunately, so that will be sometime after release. I'll be reviewing that.
we've got Spider-Man coming out this month as well too, so I'm gonna be picking that up. Bunch of other little smaller things and stuff as well too.
And
that
Alan Wake
that we'll
2.
have.
Alan Wake 2. I
Yeah, Alan
cannot
Wake 2 as
wait.
well.
Oh.
So we got a bunch of stuff going. We just dropped the review for Assassin's Creed
Yeah, but
Mirage.
and by the time people are seeing this episode, Assassin's Creed Mirage will be out, most likely. So hopefully you're enjoying playing it. I will be reviewing the game for Outer Haven because I just haven't had time to play it yet. Um, but Jeff got his code a bit earlier than I did, so he was able to get a review done. And we've only got probably about 5 minutes left here, Jeff. But
Yeah,
what I'd like to know is mostly is does it fulfill what it set out to fulfill, which is kind of returning to the roots of the franchise?
yeah, like from that type of statement, yes, for sure. Does it do anything new? Not really. But I mean, people just kind of wanted to return back to the 20-hour Assassin's Creed style game of being an assassin in a Middle East country, and they pull that off. I think the characters are pretty cool. There's one particular moment with the character that I think is unbelievably neat. Um, it's got some excellent voice talent. The all the accents and stuff are authentic as they need to be. Baghdad is very cool. Like it's a wonderful city. It's got three districts around the round city that are all like you have Kark, which is like the market district. You've got I'm gonna butcher the other two. Um, One of them is like an industrial area, so it's all like slaves and dockers and crime and all that kind of stuff. And then the other one is like kind of the school of like wisdom and stuff. I guess scholars and all that kind of stuff. And
Makes sense.
Baghdad is fantastic. I think the story is getting heavily criticized right now. I think the story is fine for what it does because basically it's just you encounter something
I
that leads you
also
on the path of
I get because I've only had a very quick glance at some reviews because obviously I want to form my own opinions. Um,
yeah,
but one thing I have noticed is I think that people are treating this like it's a triple A kind of mainline Assassin's Creed game, and I get it because it's the latest release. But
yeah,
let's remember that this game evolved from what was originally planned to be a DLC for Valhalla, and
it,
it's being sold at a lower price point. So why
barely. It's like $10 cheaper.
is it? I mean, over here in the UK, it's like well, saying that probably works out about right because yeah, here in the UK, it's about 20 to £25 cheaper depending on which edition you buy. Because they're selling it for between £45 and £50. Which, for context, here in the UK,
It's 70 Canadian here.
oh wow, so for context, here in the UK, the price point of £50 is what they tend to sell sort of your
Yeah,
premium double A games at.
yeah, because like this is made by like a studio that was essentially a support studio.
Yeah,
Like
it's
they
their
worked
first
on
game, right?
Rainbow Six Extraction. They worked on a bunch of stuff, and they're also the lead tech engineers on the Anvil engine. So like there's barely any like pop in. I had one instance, I think. There's one area, the bazaar, where there's a ton of people. It ran in single digits. It was the only part of the game that ran extremely poorly. Other than that, game runs good. Good, it looks good. I think that people are kind of like that typical Xbox One, PS4 era, but the game is running on that hardware as well. So I
Yes.
think that people don't look as good as they could. I think it's a visual step back from Valhalla in some respects because again, you have like a third of the team size, but it's still great if you are wanting that return to Assassin's Creed where it's that 20-hour game. That's what this is.
Yeah.
It
Uh,
doesn't do anything new, but it
so I do
it
want to
does.
talk. I want to talk a little bit about the gameplay because obviously we've heard the game doesn't really do anything new, but I think that or I get the impression at least, that the entire idea of this game was, let's give something to the old school fans and let's remind them that we know what an Assassin's Creed game is, because I
Yeah,
think because I think that over the course of the last few entries, I'm not saying they're not brilliant games, because they are. I actually
yeah,
think Valhalla was a brilliant game, and Odyssey speaks for itself. But they also, in many ways, weren't really Assassin's Creed games, and I think that
yeah. They were better.
and I think that
No,
that
like Ubisoft saw what CD Projekt was doing with The Witcher, and they're like, we want that,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
and
And there's
that's
nothing and there's
where.
nothing wrong with that. But I also think, in a weird way, and maybe it's just me as an old school fan, but I actually think that this feels like the perfect time to return to that older formula. And we've seen it
Yeah,
before with other franchises where, when you let something rest for a little while, because I think Syndicate was the last one to have the old school formula, right? And that was a 2015 game, I believe. So we're talking about 8 years between the last traditional style Assassin's Creed and Mirage, which isn't fully traditional from what I've seen and from what, is out there now. Um, but it's certainly much closer to the traditional
yeah.
style of Assassin's Creed
It, is-
than the latest
it is
entries.
similar. I don't think it's going to set the bar for what the series is going to be going forward because, again, we've got 7 different Assassin's Creed games pretty much being made.
Yeah,
But I think the next main one is still going to be another big adventure like
I
Valhalla
I
because it's
agree.
probably
I
already
agree.
2 or 3
But
years in development.
it does make me wonder though. So I want to get back to gameplay in a minute, but before we do that, do you think, having played Mirage, is it good enough that it's sort of opened the door for potentially more of these almost like spin-off smaller
Yeah,
experiences that can
I
be in the
think
more traditional style?
Ubisoft, what is it, Bordeaux, I think
Yeah.
is the name of it.
Mhm.
I think honestly, it would be foolish to not have them work on another one, and maybe they'll do like companion style games because like the importance of Bossum from Valhalla, especially with this,
Yeah.
is where the future of Assassin's Creed's going. Um, like they did this to kind of tell like the origin story, and I don't know if it's a story that was really needed to be told, but Bossum as a character is going to become crucial to the future of Assassin's Creed.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and they tease enough here with where his future goes that they don't kind of reveal it. So that if people are interested, they could go to Valhalla and play it
Yes.
because yeah, he is the most important character in the Assassin's Creed story right now.
Yeah.
And the reason why is pretty cool. Um, and they do a good job here. Like again, like Mirage is a return to form. It brings with it a lot of the modern things as well. Like it still has the armor and weapons that have stats and loots and costumes and stuff.
But it's
It
very
brings the
scaled back though, right? It's
kind of, yeah, like you have like an armor set, and then you'll equip that, and then that'll have stats, and then you can upgrade it like 3 times. And then you have weapons, and they'll have stats, and you can upgrade them 3 times. You have a sword and then a dagger, and then you have a little dangly thing that does nothing. Um, but it also brings with it uh, the cult board from Odyssey, which is to me the best thing Assassin's Creed has ever done. And that is where it gives you like these mystery targets that all
yes.
have little clues and stuff. This one's way more simplified because there's only like 4 or 5 like direct targets, and then the rest are the little like generals and stuff. But even then, that's incredibly basic. But that stuff was super fun.
Yeah.
I don't think any of uh, the reveals in regards to like those members or anything like that because like when you have the one in Odyssey I was like okay that's
Mhm.
actually pretty cool but how they handle it here is a little bit different. Side quests are really good as well too. They it's the Baghdad is not a um, map barf like all of the other ones are. Like you have little points on the map, but it's not a flood of things whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it again, it's one of those games. It still suffers from the same issues I had with the Assassin's Creed games, especially the old ones, and even Shadow of Mordor. And that is that climbing and platforming and parkouring doesn't always isn't always stationed well to have that pacing. So sometimes you'll be escaping and you'll climb, and then there'll be nothing for you to climb,
Yeah. And
or you
that's
can't.
that's a strange one because I know that that is also a conscious decision because in the more RPG style ones, they've actually
Yeah,
allowed you to sort of climb anything, and therefore it alleviates that problem slightly. But I
yeah,
know that based on fan feedback, they decided to go back to the more traditional style of climbing where it was more
which
like a
sucks because
puzzle. But
that was my only issue with like the that kind of like the platforming and climbing,
yeah,
because even like trying to like hop down from another little platform can be a pain in the ass.
yeah, I
And you
bet.
get stuck like when you have a window and you're trying to climb it, your character will basically like hop up. No, 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 just hop. Okay, I gotta go. No, like come on. Okay, finally. Like that is constant.
Yeah. I do want to
Um,
ask, so I want to end on, because I don't want to spoil this game for people, but I
yeah,
do want to end on, obviously, they've made a big point in the marketing and in the way they've spoken about the game of this being the return of kind of more stealth focused gameplay and being an actual assassin again. Can you tell us a bit about how that sort of
sure.
manifests in the actual game
Um,
itself?
So I mean, social blending's back in, so you can hide in crowds. You can pay um, shops to essentially like guide you through certain areas. You can pay mercenaries to like distract guards so that you can sneak up and go behind. It's got tall grass. It's got things that you can hide in, things on the rooftops and all that kind of stuff. It's got daggers and blow darts and like smoke bombs and noise machines and all sorts of stuff to kind of assist in tools. It's got an assassin focused attack where if you're not in combat, you can click up to 5 enemies and then Boston will basically teleport to them and to kill them. That's the only like powers that they kind of illustrate, even though it's just him being quick.
Yeah, it's him being quick.
Uh,
The because I have seen that. The only thing I wish about that, and it's just me being nitpicky, is I in a weird way I wish they had found a way to just have it be this cool chained animation as opposed to him teleporting because
yeah,
the teleporting
I,
part is the part that makes it feel like oh it's a power, whereas if it was
I, I think it's mostly just to be like when you're watching like something with Batman
mm,
and like the guy's talking and all of a sudden zip
yeah
zip you
that's
see all
true.
these people like disappear behind. It's that it's you're seeing the zip part.
Hmm. Hmm.
So like that's how I treat it, is that it's just him being super quick more so
And
than him actually
for
teleporting.
people that want to know roughly what kind of scale of game this is, I believe this game took you about 22 hours to finish, right?
Yeah, but I did practically like every single side quest and I explored the map fully.
Yeah.
I got the all of the shards to collect the 3 items. I did all of the Tales of Baghdad, which are like these little side stories that I don't think convey their objective as well as they should.
Okay.
But I did pretty much everything.
That's good.
I just didn't
Good.
100% every
So
collectible.
essentially what Jeff is saying is that in scale of game, in terms of time you're going to spend in this game, is this is essentially an old Assassin's Creed game. It's a 20 to maybe 25 hour video
Yeah,
game.
you could mainline the story in probably 10 hours
Yeah. Yeah.
if you ignored everything else.
Yeah.
And
Um
there's like it's it does give you some variety in regards to like how you go about certain missions and stuff. So there
yes.
is a little bit of replay.
Yeah. So overall then, obviously we'll send people to read your review, which is on the site right now. But overall, if you were to sort of sum it up in 2 sentences for people, how would you describe this game?
Yeah, like basically it's kind of a return to that assassin focused Assassin Creed without the excessive RPG systems. Like it plays like if they remade the first game now.
Interesting.
You know,
That's
like
really
it,
interesting.
it
Yeah.
it plays very similar to that kind of stuff without, again, like I don't I to me it's like the bloat isn't what made those other games like better for me. It's just the
Yeah.
simple fact that Assassin's Creed for me, I've never been interested in the sci-fi approach. I've never been interested in the present day stuff. If it had been just a period piece right from the get-go, I probably would have enjoyed it. And Mirage is entirely a period piece. Like it teases at the little strings that kind of hold that series together with that kind of stuff, but it is entirely a period piece.
Yeah.
It is just Bassam's adventure.
I mean, they've definitely gone that way more now, haven't they? With the less
They've
focus on the
lessened it
modern day stuff.
for sure.
Yeah.
Because like Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla barely had that stuff. Like maybe 2 to 3 hours max.
Which I think is the right way to go. I'm with you on that. Anyway, we're going to have to close out this episode here, Jeff. So, is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
No, it's just stick with the podcast. And then again, like um, if there's any feedback that you guys have, if there's anything that you're kind of wanting to see, if you are a content creator and want to reach out, you can find our contact emails basically right through um, analyticgaming.com. But yeah, we just want to make sure that the podcast is going to be something that's fun, something that we're going to continue to kind of
And it
grow up
won't
and
and it won't normally be this long. Just to be clear, we
yeah,
started slightly late today, and we had a lot to go through. Normally we're aiming for around 2 hours per episode. So yeah, just but give us a follow on Twitter. We have our individual handles below us just here. But I'll also link the actual podcast Twitter in the description, because if you follow us there, we'll tweet out when the episodes are live. Because at the moment, I don't know. I don't know if we'll have a set day every week, because the way our schedules work is we're gonna have to record on slightly different days every week, and that might affect when the podcast comes out itself. So if you stay tuned to the Twitter, you'll be able to always know as soon as it's available.
yeah.
Thank you, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.